You're here for our third negotiation meeting to reach a negotiated agreement for the upcoming school year. We independently did our best to go through the IBB process with regard to an issue raised by the association regarding temporary leave days. And specifically, we sort of pinpointed that issue at going toward questions and concerns around competitiveness and sufficiency of leave, specifically potentially with regard to teachers who are in their first couple years with the school district. And so I think what we talked about is it may make sense to do a review and to see if there's anything to add in terms of development of what the exact issue is and interest statements. And then we agreed to do homework from our last meeting, which was to try and, the association had brought forth data at our last meeting or information at our last meeting about what leave looks like in the negotiated agreements for other area school districts. But we wanted data about Shawnee Mission and professional employees' use of leave, the cost of a leave day. And so that homework has been done. Much appreciation to Dr. Hinson. Wow, Dr. Higgins, going way back. Dr. Higgins and Allison for doing that. They'll be ready to present when we get there.
Okay. You all accomplished a lot on your collective commitment work. And so for today, if we're going to go ahead and pick up the conversation about leave, before we go into the information that's going to be shared, I had asked you to go ahead and screen share, if you could, the notes you took when you all IBB'd that. So just to remind us of anything that was really outstanding or pertinent under frame and focus, let us glance at the interest you all identified. And then maybe just a quick review of any potential brainstormed ideas. Did you get that far? Mm-hmm. Okay, you did. Okay. And then we can go ahead and take in the new information, if that makes sense. Yes. So what do you got? Aw. Aw.
Look at those gorgeous family pictures, John.
Try to make the screen larger. Oh, I lost it.
I have it up to you.
Okay. Do you want to screen share?
Yeah, I can do it for mine.
And then also, just read us the issue statement, the how do we, just to start, just to kind of refocus us on what we're trying to accomplish.
Conference room.
Are you screen sharing from the US? Yes, that'd be fun. They're probably not appreciative.
I'm working on getting my computer to cooperate. If anybody else has more success than I do right now, please go for it.
Why isn't it going, I wonder? It's
Is
not.
that you?
No.
I was going to say, what a clean desktop.
If only.
Right?
You want this here?
There it is.
Oh,
You
awesome.
have a split screen, I hope that's okay. There you
Let me make it bigger though from the split screen.
Can it be made a little
Yeah,
larger?
right?
go. You guys,
Sorry.
it's the wrong way to do it, but that's fine. There you go.
There we go. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that looks better. So what was the how do we?
Okay. How do we ensure that the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of our professional employees, and are they competitive with surrounding districts? Do you want me to make it bigger?
I can see it okay. Can others?
There.
Oh, that's so much better.
Okay. And then we focused the issue by saying new teachers to SMSD post-COVID are having to take off more days, have surgeries, care for children, and then also mental health days. Then we went over the data from Dr. Higgins, and in semester one there was this many illnesses, this many personal days, the total 23, 24. Illness was this, personal was this. No long-term absences were included in the data, and no vacancy absences were included in the data. We do have block out days, and personal days on block out days are docked pay. Discretionary days are good for retention and recruitment, and then we talked about bereavement a lot last time, and that we, currently, the way that we do it is you get 3 days for every occurrence of someone in your immediate family passing away. And then we also just had a little bit of a discussion about including like a loss of a pregnancy in the bereavement. And then our interests that we said were be competitive with other districts so that people don't leave, but they stay here in the district. We talked about principals not having discretionary days that don't, making sure, what was that? They do have.
I
That
think
was
that's
so
like
that
not putting principals in a position where they're having to decide when an
okay.
employee
Over the
can and
personal
can't take a day.
That makes sense. Okay,
But is that a position or is your interest equity?
So we spent a long time talking about how our leave system works as compared to other districts. And I use this term that ours is more modern or more modernized, so we don't distinguish from personal and leave. So a day is a day, and you can take it for any reason. So for example, if you are working in other districts, we found the majority of their days are designated as sick. So if you turn in a sick day and it is discovered that you were at Worlds of Fun, that can be a disciplinary issue. We don't have that here.
The
So
days-
there's no work on administrators to try and figure out why someone took a leave day, and we don't want to create, we sort of decided we have a joint interest in keeping our system modern like that.
All
okay.
right, got it.
Teachers continue to put personal days in advance. So we're saying that if someone's taking a personal day, they're not putting it in the day of their absence, like they're putting it in advance. Right now, the way we have it, there's minimal management time by people at like the district level, the principal level. They're not having to manage like approved personal days. Minimal days in order to buy back. So I think what we were saying there is that we have a minimal amount of days to sell back because we only have 10. Is that what we were trying to get at? What are we trying to say there? Minimum,
That's saying that you have to have at least like X amount of days
Oh,
banked
that's what we
before
wanna
you
do.
can start selling days back.
okay,
So that's more of just a frame and focus that exists, correct?
I think so. Okay, we don't want teachers to run out of days and have to be docked like their pay. Flexibility of days is a big recruitment piece, and the fact that our days are days, that they can use them for anything.
And it sounds like self-managed,
Yes.
pretty much.
Yes. No incentives to like game the system. Yes. Affordability and sustainability. Not having leave days impact learning or coworker workload. And
Keep it simple.
less complexity as
Understood.
possible is kind of what
Okay.
we're looking at. And then we kind of put in the data from other districts, like how many days they have, how many sick days, kind of how they're kind of coded. And then we went to our solutions.
How did you all's days look in comparison, or was it very easy to compare? Did you just look at net days, and where did Shawnee Mission land?
We looked at net days and then how those days are divvied out. Like, so for example, in KCK, they have 10 illness days, but 2 personal, and the personal have to be pre-approved.
And you kept the 3 days of bereavement away from this?
Yes, we
Okay.
want to do that.
And so what are the days in Shawnee Mission?
We just get 10 days.
Just
You can use them
like
for
10,
whatever
got it.
you would like. Yes.
Understood.
But we were saying that one of the things that we brought up is that we do get 10 days, and days are days, but then if we were to carry all of those 10 days over, we still would have less than everybody else. Because if they don't use any of their 13 days, they carry 13 days over every year. So it's a little bit easier for them to build up time for like, if they needed it for like a sickness or maternity leave or something like that, every year they would be getting 3 more additional days than we would.
You all
Or
can
even
carry
15.
over? Okay.
We
If
can
we don't
carry-
use them, they roll over into sick leave.
And is there a
Yes.
cap on that?
There is not,
Okay. Or were there a cap on the other districts, or did you know that?
Some districts
There-
do
yes.
have caps.
but not all.
Okay. Possible solution?
Yes. Add some days to our current sick and personal leave bank. Having a leave bank managed by NEA-Shawnee Mission and Shawnee Mission School District. Have a certain number of days banked in order to buy back days. So for example, that was like we were going to make people have like 10 days before they could start selling their days back, kind of a thing, does that make sense? Inform teachers on how to use their days on the online system. So some people were using sick days when they should have been using bereavement days, so just really educating people on what to use for each one. Adding in, same thing with like sick days, because like some people don't understand like if they're going to the doctor that that's technically a sick day. So really educating people on how to code their days. Adding information to the P&A to summary that emphasizes benefit of the banking the days. So letting people know why they should bank their days and not just sell them all back. 10 days or days, adding 5 sick or bereavement days was a rollover. Someone suggested that. 10 days or days, adding X number of sick days, but they all roll over. Adding loss of a pregnancy to bereavement, take leave by the hour. So for now, right now, what we do is if you want to go to the doctor in the morning, you have to put in a half day. And we were saying that some people only spend an hour at the doctor, so they could just take an hour instead of a
So right now,
full.
your minimum is half day?
Yes. Start teachers with a certain number of days in their bank and then add to everyone's bank. So the reason why we said that was because unfortunately our new to the profession or our new teachers are running out of days because they're getting sick because it's their first time maybe being around exposed to these germs. And so they're running out of days. And so we thought about to make that equitable for everybody that one of the ideas was to add a set number of days to everybody's bank at the beginning of the year to give them more days, but also make it equitable to people who have already been working in the district.
And then there's your list of additional information, which
So that's
we're
what-
prepared to get into today?
Yes.
Can we scroll up to the issue statement real quick? I just want to flag it now instead of later, and it may not even be an issue to flag, and I'm not going to ask that we adjust it, but where you have, how do we ensure the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of professional employees? And when you have competitive with surrounding districts, competitive is an interest. So part of meeting the needs, one interest would be competitive. Because if you embed a particular interest in the issue statement, then it means that you can't accept a solution that you don't agree is competitive. Whereas sometimes if you just have competitive as one of many interests, you may find a solution that really nails all the interest, but it doesn't nail competitive, but it's still what you decide to do. But if you've got one of your interests embedded in your issue statement, it's gonna make that interest one that you have to meet. When usually you guys can choose and say, hey, we nailed 9 of 10 interests and we still think we have consensus, but maybe you didn't nail that one. The way you have it worded now, if you don't nail competitive, you don't solve the problem. So I would say that people should sort of think in your minds, competitive is an interest. And your issue
Certainly a
statement.
joint interest.
Yeah. Your interest statement really ends with the word employees. How do we, ensure that it meets the needs? And you're identifying what you think needs are under interest, and competitive is an interest. Okay. Anybody have anything they want to add to the conversation that maybe didn't get caught in the notes that you wanted to emphasize or remind folks of, or any questions about those notes? And if not, then, Rachel, you probably know who had what assignment, or is that written somewhere? Folks here know what they've got and who wants to report?
It might well, I know Allison has, I think, Girl Scouts to be at, so why don't we let Allison go first? I think she's got less material than Dr. Higgins gathered, but I had asked her because we know that there's a cost to leave days in a couple different respects, but one is pure financial cost, right? And so we need that information, and I asked Allison to kind of put together for us, tell us what one leave day costs for our professional employees, and so she's got some information to share.
Yes, thank you. Would you mind sharing on AirPlay? I don't have that cool AirPlay thing since I don't have Dell. Yes, do you mind sharing that? So yes, I costed out the amount it would cost the district to add one temporary day. So, delay. So we determined that there was either the cost of selling back the leave day or the cost of having a sub for the day, and that there is going to be either one of those options, depending on how that leave day is used. So the cost of selling back one day for all of the certified employees, which is about almost 2,200 employees, is $176,000 versus if that was used for the day was actually used and we would need a sub in that place, it would cost $390,000.
It's an annual cost.
Annual
And that
cost, yes. And that's just for one day.
Any idea what percentage of our leave days are typically used with a sub and what percentage are used or bought back?
We do know that if you look a little bit further down, the percentage of days that were sold back in total for 10 days that is currently being given as a benefit is approximately 5% of it is sold back. So we would anticipate that the majority is actually being used for subs. As they're actually using that day, we're getting a sub in that place. And so most of it would be more of a sub cost.
Is the sell back on an annual basis or end of career?
You can do it annually.
It's annual.
That feeds into my next question. How many of them are then actually being used?
I don't have that information, but I do have the amount of leave that is currently available as an average for the employees. So if you want to switch to that other tab, this is a 4-year look back of the amount of leave that was available in employees' buckets based off their longevity. So 0 years on that left-hand column is going to represent that they're a new employee. So they, as you can see, going down, it does vary based off how long they've been with the district, how much they have available in that leave bucket.
This is how many days they have accessible to them, how many temporary leave days total they have accessible?
Yes, yes. So that would be both the current year allotment plus the rollover amount.
So can you scroll up so we can see the information? There we go. So if you are a first-year teacher, year 0.
Yes.
The average for a first-year teacher to have available on January 31st is 6.7 days.
So yeah, that was as of January 31st, since we haven't processed the March paycheck yet. There was 6.7 days available through the end of January. Then going over across, there's as of June 30th at the end of the last fiscal year, the previous fiscal year, and 2 fiscal years back.
So at the end of the year, they have an average of 3.9 to 5.9 days for the past 4 years.
Yep.
Okay. So they're using about half their leave days their first year.
It's not bad, actually.
On average.
And then a first-year teacher,
And that does include the sellback as well.
oh, so they could have sold some back and have just kept that many. So,
Oh, interesting.
okay. So they are retaining that many either by not using them or not selling them back, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So even with the sellback option, which I'm hopeful that if you are a 0-year teacher, you're really being conservative about selling back, but, okay.
I would guess that not many people sell partial amounts of days. They're either selling all their days or none of their days, would be my guess. That may be a bad guess to make.
Is it an option to sell back a few of your days? Oh, good for us. I don't take that option, so.
And then it just continues to increase, so at which is denoted by the color there, right?
Yep, so the red, of course, indicates that they have the lesser amount of days in their bucket at the end of the year versus the green indicates that they have more. So as the years progress, we do see that there are more days available in their bucket because they're probably not selling as many back or.
So at 5-year, the range is 17 to 20.6. That you're going to go into your 6-year with. Okay.
So right now, there's no requirement that you hold back a minimum?
No.
You can just settle down to 0 if you?
Yes.
This is just, this is average, so there could be some who have more.
Yes.
than
Of course.
6 years.
Of course.
Some of us have small humans and have to use our sick days and don't have that much banked and now feel bad about their bank.
So at 10 years, then we're looking at a range at the end of the year of 25.8 to 31.1. Just trying to like grab a couple years just to look at it. And then what's 15?
33.6 and 29.9.
Okay.
Why, where's your head going with this, Rachel?
I mean, it's probably makes a lot of sense, but I'm just trying to see what is the jump up at 0, 5, 10, how many days you tend to have there. And I mean, again, as a mom myself, like,
Yeah.
I get it. It's like you have the days when you don't need them.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
it's hard. And it, again, speaking as someone who went through this myself, when the days aren't there, you do get concerned about what if my kid is sick. And even though we don't terminate people for exceeding their days, like we work with people, like, again, for equal treatment, we do those as doc days, but sometimes if they're not there, you feel like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a challenge that is sort of this upside down, that toward the end of your career, you have a lot of days if you haven't had a bunch of stuff
Right,
happen to
issues,
you,
yeah.
right? If you've had to
Yep.
take FML for multiple long-term illnesses or to care for parents, you might not look like I'm at year 29 with 30 days left.
Correct,
But
yeah.
that's just an average. There's going to be people with more and less.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Tell me again what you all do on maternity.
You have FML available, and you can use your accrued leave days to the extent that you have them,
You
to
have to
continue
use
to
them.
be paid out. If you use them, though, then those days are not there
have
for
to
you.
use them.
Oh, you do, you have to
You
use them.
have to use them.
to
You
use
don't
your-
have the
The
option
rest
to
of your
save them or
FMLA
not
will be
use them.
unpaid? The rest of your FMLA, if you take up to?
Yeah, then the rest would be unpaid.
Unless you're using your short-term disability,
Yes.
which you have to have already done, so.
And can folks opt into short-term disability annually?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
but you can't do so after you find out.
Right.
right.
So that's a big education piece,
Yes,
especially because,
absolutely.
I mean, if you came to me as a 22-year-old and tried to sell me short-term disability, I'd be like, no,
No,
I'm
yeah.
invincible, right? But, because you're not thinking about all the uses,
Well,
so.
and having to use those days when you get back, you do then have nothing if you have,
Right.
if you've blown,
Right.
not blown through, but if you've had to use those days that you've already attempted to save, if it doesn't cover the entire leave.
Right.
And then those small humans get sick.
So then, when a teacher is out of days, but still has a sick kid, then they're just in non-paid status?
Yes.
And,
They're
but this
docked.
district's still,
We
of
get-
course, providing a
we get-
sub?
It's not non-paid,
It's
it's
docked.
docked.
Oh,
we
it's
get-
actually docked from, right, got
Yes.
it. Got docked and, but, and. the
But yes,
district pays for
a sub is still, if available.
Did you all look at, or are you going to look at information on how often you've got folks docked?
That's a great question, and we probably
is, yeah.
should. I mean, anecdotally, I don't, like, real rough, down and dirty, I don't hear about it happening that often, but I know that it has happened. I think the most common, the only, and maybe it's just because of my position, because I don't sit in HR, the time I'm most familiar with it is when we have an employee just abandon their position, and they've run out of days. We stop paying them until we can terminate the contract, but.
I can try to find some data on how
days.
often dock days occur only for those people when they run out of their leave balances. We have people who are docked for taking personal leave on blockout days.
Yeah.
We don't want that information.
No.
People aren't paid during certain leaves. We don't want that information. I went through all 10 of my days.
Yes.
Yep.
I don't have
Yes.
any days built up. I'm being docked because I have a sick kid or I'm
Yeah.
sick or whatever the
Yes.
case may be.
Yeah, that'd be good to know. Because I think either in frame and focus or in interest, you had teachers losing pay.
Yes.
So yeah, we probably just need to know how often that actually occurs. I want to make sure, again, when we're understanding the one leave day cost, we're somewhere in this very large range of 176,000 to 390,000, but we're thinking that it is more weighted toward 390 because most typically days are used rather than
Yes,
bought back.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Can you just tell me how you got to those numbers a little bit?
How we got to the sellback cost?
Yes.
Yep. So the sellback cost, of course, is that $75 per day, times the number of employees that we have with benefits. So there's Social Security and unemployment that's tied to that.
Right.
And then the sub cost was basically the cost of a daily sub. So the district takes on $179 per sub
Okay.
per day. So assuming all 2,181 days were used, that would be the cost of that.
All right, perfect, thank you.
And that's just educators, that's not admin.
Yes. This is just certified.
And again, just kind of with that, just, so like my social worker doesn't require a sub, that's not factoring in the social workers, the instructional coaches.
It would
Just-
factor in, yes, the social worker and instructional coaches.
At least the sellback with the sub costs, would that potentially lower that number some?
Yes, it could.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're weighted more toward 390, but we also understand that we don't have a sub 100% of the time.
Right.
Either because the position doesn't require it or simply because it's unavailable. Okay. Any more questions for Allison before we thank her and let her go to Girl Scouts? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
I believe I have a link to this and I will save it to our shared folder so we
perfect.
all own it.
Okay.
Okay, and then I know Dr. Higgins.
I don't have a lot to add to that. Allison was the one that was able to
Okay.
really pull the data. So, other than my own commentary on the data, I don't really have anything to add on those particular topics.
Can you share, because I was just thinking about this, what Stephanie had talked about with competitiveness and having that be an interest, just like the HR viewpoint on how the leave benefit plays into recruitment and retention and how you think that we're viewed as to other districts or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, in all of my final interviews with secondary folks, I talk about the number of days they get and also the flexibility that they have with those days. For some people, that really resonates because they've probably been in another district, and for some people, they're like, yeah, okay. So I think that those people who have lived it in other places, that they have to ask for permission to use personal days, or I think it does make a difference. It perks their ears. Is it make or break? I don't know if it's make or break, but it is, I think, in my own personal opinion, a valuable piece to be able to play, that it is flexible in regards to our leave policies.
Have you ever, like anecdotally, had someone say, well, I'm coming from Olathe or Blue Valley, I got 12 or 13 days?
Nobody's ever brought up another district and the number of leave days that they received there compared to here.
Would it be maybe because mostly that's a moot point because you don't get to bring them? Because I know that when I got hired here, that wasn't a thought for me because I don't get to bring them. You don't get to take them with you.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's-
and I don't. no one has ever said, oh, well, we got, 13 days. And when I bring up you get 10 days in Shawnee Mission, nobody's ever said, oh, well, we got 12 in this. Nobody's ever brought that up.
I mean, I think part of that conversation too is people aren't going to bring it up because of, and again, don't take this the wrong way, who they're meeting with.
Right.
They don't want to show any I don't know if I want to use the word disrespect, but they want to make sure they're being very respectful still in that interview. So I think some of that's going to factor in too.
Maybe.
Do we give
You'd be
them,
surprised with some of the things that are brought up.
do we give them information? Like, when do they ask about that?
wondering
Is that
about
like,
that.
how do they learn about that?
That's just part of when I offer a contract
You
to
tell
a new
them?
teacher. That's something that I tell them as I'm talking about salary, capers, health insurance. I treat those days as kind of a benefit package because
Yeah.
that's part of what it is. So
Absolutely.
that's when I talk about it. So, and it's not a in-depth discussion. It's just,
Hey,
here's
this
the
is
number of
what's
days you
available.
have. Yeah.
And then you decide, here's your offer, here's the benefits, you
Yep.
decide, okay.
Do we have data when it comes to like sub coverage and the cost of a sick day on how do building subs work when it comes to that? So are building subs paid like just a salary and then, or are they paid based on how much they fill?
Yeah, so
that
they're paid, it's, think of a normal sub.
Oh, okay, they're just stationed at that building.
They're just stationed at that building.
Okay.
We do pay them more than the daily sub rate because of the fact that they're there every single day.
Okay.
I believe they're paid $175, but the district has a higher cost because
Right.
of the management. So I could pull those exact numbers of what we pay for the building subs. It's probably closer to $200 a day.
Okay.
So.
So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You said you could add some commentary. Was that it related to those questions, or did you have some?
No,
something
yeah,
that you wanted to-
you can look at the data a lot of different ways, right? I was actually encouraged that our brand-new teachers, there are some day balances available to them that they're carrying over. Is it as high as we'd maybe hope? No, but that's also natural, So, the end of last year, on average, brand-new teachers were carrying 3.9 days. I mean, that's something, right? It's interesting as I was looking at it, kind of where the tipping point was when maybe people aren't carrying as many days, and it looked to me like years 5 through like years 10, we start to stagnate a little bit. You see from 0 to 1, you're seeing 2 days kind of go in, and then you get to 5 to 10, and it's not quite. So that's, and you think about the progression of people's careers and what's going on at that stage in life, there's probably some families going on, so some balances are being used and things of that nature. Are we going to have one-offs from this, that a new employee has 0 days? Yeah, I mean, that is, but I also like to see that there are days being carried forward and being banked. I think it's interesting also, if you look just at our brand-new teachers, right? The 0 column, 21, 22, 23, 5.9, 4.1, 3.9. There's a lot of information out there from employers nationwide about people utilizing days on a more frequent nature, especially people early in their career. We're obviously seeing that as well, where people are utilizing their days more frequently. So,
Well, would COVID have anything to do with that 21 year?
that would be 20.
Wouldn't that be coming off of it? Is that the 21, or 2021 year?
2021 year.
So that probably has something to do with that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's COVID
Right.
certainly could. Yeah.
When you say like data out there in other employers, is this sort of like the new generation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because you do hear a lot of comments almost in a derogatory fashion, but just young people are gonna, they use their leave days. They're gonna go on that vacation. They're gonna take that trip. And we, Stephanie had sort of this philosophical discussion last time about, or actually maybe it was pretty concrete about how much constraint to put on and how much to let people self-manage their leave days, right? So if you are a person who, you know, YOLO, I'm gonna use all my days, but you're willing to take the risk that you have some illness and have to go to doc days, you know, do we say that happens sometimes and that person made their own decision, or do we want to talk about putting boundaries in place so that can't happen, like you must have a certain number of days banked before you sell back, or even getting back into limiting use of personal days. I don't think we want to, but we threw that out there as when you do that and you limit usage of personal days and make the majority of your days exclusively for illness of yourself or your immediate family, your household members, that can increase the numbers that you're seeing there.
I mean, I think there is an interest on both sides to keep days are days.
Yes.
Just kind of
100%.
my response
I
to
agree.
that I know Dr. Higgins has mentioned it is a recruiting tool. And on our side, that's
Yeah.
a golden standard type of thing, days are
Yeah.
days.
And again, I do think it's more modern, and I think it's less administrative work, frankly.
So much less administrative work.
But what it means is that you're gonna have some people who have not managed well. And then the
Absolutely.
question is, you know, it's really hard in those shades of gray. Did you mismanage, or did some unfortunate things happen to you? And
Which a sick bank leave might alleviate some of that if misfortunate things are
Yeah.
Yes.
occurring.
And I do think, one, the sick bank leave, and then just back to that educational piece.
Yeah, really
getting
Really educating those new to the profession teachers, hey, plan ahead. As much as you might want to take that tropical vacation that you've always wanted to take, put it
Do it
off
on
a
a
couple
school
of
break.
years. Do it on a school
Do it
break.
on a school
Don't take it
break.
off.
And take a couple of years if you have to do it during the school year for some reason.
Right.
And where that education comes from, I don't know if it's New Teacher Academy, we talked to some about that last time.
Sprinkle some in.
Right,
that
I
first
know.
quarter.
NEA-Shawnee Mission, we had kind of a mid-year New Teacher Academy that was just like a 2-hour quick
Yeah.
blurb. Something that I know I'm not volunteering Jill back there for anything, but something that we
NTA,
might be
yeah.
willing to do as well, having an optional, hey, come learn a little bit about this stuff with NEA.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I think, 2 or 3 things around education and a sick leave bank that were on your list of brainstorm ideas. Maybe let's look back at those and see how deeply you unpacked each of those in terms of meeting interest, or at least not harming some interest, and then that feasibility, affordable, manageable piece.
Yep.
But remind me, doesn't Shawnee Mission as a district have some sort of bank that maybe,
Yes.
I've already heard you talk about, you want to explain what that is?
And Dr. Higgins can probably explain it more in detail. We do have a board managed sick leave bank, which 200-something days
200,
annually.
250 annually.
And it was heavily used and hit during COVID by individuals who ran out of days, and through negotiations, we had an agreement to use it kind of for what it was intended for. And so for those individuals who unfortunately got very ill from COVID or had a lot of family members who got COVID, we were able to use that. What I understand, one differentiation between our Shawnee Mission sick leave bank, or what is it called?
We don't have.
Sick leave bank?
Yeah, it would be a sick leave bank.
Sick leave bank is that it is for illness, and so I understand that there are a couple other school districts that have their bank set up to allow professional employees to donate those days, to donate days to the bank that can then be used upon application by, for example, a teacher who's going to go on maternity leave and would like to borrow days from that bank so that their maternity leave can be paid and then pay them back over time. I believe Turner School District is one that has one, and following our meeting last meeting, Dr. Hubbard shared with our executive team that she used that when she was a teacher in Turner, and then just budgeted to slowly pay back her days to the bank over time.
So the current Shawnee Mission sick bank, school district sick bank, the 250 days are not donated. They're just 250 days that are funded by the board.
Yes.
And it is for illnesses of the teacher, or could it be teacher or spouse or
It's
family?
I believe just let's pull up the language and be sure, but it's usually for like, again, long-term illnesses, so think like cancer treatments and things like that, where you may be gone for, a month, but then be able to work a little bit, be gone for a month for another treatment. So typically things like that, where because of a really bad illness like that, you're having to utilize FML maybe multiple school years even. Let's pull it up.
And do you all have information on how many days have been granted to folks out of that bank over the past year or so?
We do.
Not looking at COVID?
Not off the top of my head, though.
Yeah.
We do.
I don't think I've made, so all the requests funneled through myself and our other HR director. I have not made any requests to the board this year.
Okay, we're on page 34 of the P&A. It's for professional employees only in the instance of prolonged illness or personal injury, other than work comp. And they can make an application to the Board of Education to borrow no more than 20 days per fiscal year, which is a school year. And the employee does not have to repay those days. So I know we got very close to 250 during COVID.
Yeah.
But I think typically you're looking at 1 to 0 applications a year.
Is it something is that an education piece, or do people have knowledge of that bank?
Well, for sure, I felt like last year we went over the 250. Like, I think they were just letting, from what I remember from last year when we talked about it, like, that was one of the reasons why we wanted to sunset that idea, because we were spending so much, I felt like, is what I remember.
That was
them
only
saying.
in relation to the COVID piece.
Yes, that's what I mean, yeah.
I think there was concern that if we continued to leave it, there wouldn't be days for perhaps someone else who needed it for prolonged illness. And that we were sort of at that balance where the need to take it for COVID with wanting to have days available for others was balancing out.
On the short-term disability, do you know what percentage of your teachers actually have enrolled in that? And do you know, is it possible to find that out by seniority?
That's a great question.
That's a Dr. Higgins question.
That's a Jennifer Lumley question.
So we're looking at needing, like, we're going to look at how often that sick leave assistance bank is hit, short-term disability. What is, again, just anecdotally, our young employees who are looking at, starting a family, are they enrolling in short-term disability?
I think if they're educated to do so before they become pregnant, because some of them did not know that you have to do that. Also, I don't think a lot of people understand you have to use all of your days before you can tap into your short-term disability.
Of your 10 days, right? You have to use all of your...
No, you have to use all of your sick days. And your sick days. You have to use everything.
Yeah.
So if your leave if you have more days banked than your leave, you don't use short-term disability. All of your days have to be used before short-term disability will start.
Yes.
And then, which makes sense. I mean, short-term disability pays up to 70%, whereas if you use your days, you're getting paid your whole salary.
So if I'm a first-year teacher and I'm going to have a child my second year, I might only have 5 days.
Yep.
And then I would hit short-term disability at a rate of 75%.
So you'd put in those 5 days, and then your short-term disability kicks in.
For up to like 12 weeks or 20-something weeks?
However, depending on what type of...
Oh, there's no max on the short-term disability?
Oh, no, there is. It's up to 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
Yeah.
So if I sell back all my days in the summer.
6 to 8, depending on.
Jill put her fingers up.
There you go. Thank you.
Got it.
FML covers for 12,
If I
right?
sell back all my days at the end of the summer, then I could potentially hit that short-term disability right away.
Right, but why would you do? You're going to be
Because
paid.
you're getting less.
You're going to get paid more by using your sick days as opposed to banking on that short-term disability. But then if you've used that, if you're putting in for that short-term disability and you have all those days, then you don't use short-term disability at all. So.
It's a really nice benefit that many.
Right. I mean, it's just whatever type of situation you're You
If
got
you have a
yourself
baby or
into
you
at
have
that
surgery
point.
in any given year, it's great.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, so.
Just so you guys want data, so here you go. 21, 22, I said I didn't have it, and I apparently lied, I can find it.
Okay.
So 21, 22, 148.5 days were requested from the board. I think all of them were related to COVID. 22, 23, 156.5. Not all of them were COVID. I would have to go through and add up what that looks like.
Do you know at least how many people it covered?
Yeah, so 21, 22, we had 42 people that made requests. And in 22, 23, that was 31 people.
Those are people that have made requests and then got the days from. Okay,
Correct.
Okay,
Both COVID and other
okay.
extenuating circumstances.
okay,
Circumstances.
gotcha.
21, 22 was 42 people.
Okay.
I know somewhere we had data on how many people use short-term disability.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we talked about it in a prior year. And my memory is that it was not as high as we would like to see. But I know we have that somewhere. In fact, it might be in a joint statement somewhere if I do a search on our break.
So that would be, with those numbers, 42 people and 31, that'd be about 1 to 2% of the 2,000 employees, right?
Yeah, and I will say those are probably bad data sets to use because we were allowing people to make requests based on COVID sickness, which is not a customary thing.
Right.
So
Well, does it also include non-teachers?
it does not include non-teachers. That was teachers
It's
only.
exclusively available to our professional employees. There is no sick leave bank like this for any other paid group that I'm aware of. I know administrators don't have one.
I mean, I'd hate to add another, do we need a subcommittee? I know we have a lot of them, but do we need one?
So, I had a lot of anxiety about this issue. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I just text Jeremy and Mike, I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? I visited with Amber last week and I was just like, okay, one point of anxiety is, I know that the board sees, and I think we all see and recognize that leave is a benefit.
Absolutely.
That we provide as a district. It is not compensation. And we had a quick talking point here, and it might have been at the last meeting, about how if we're looking at this cost, it's not a nominal cost. It's not massive, but it's not nominal.
Right.
And okay, well, would we want to send that to compensation subcommittees? I think that's weird for a couple of reasons. It should, I don't think the board sees it as a trade-off for compensation. And also there's a lot more to consider besides just pulling those levers up and down. Because
Absolutely.
there is an impact to you guys when your co-teachers are out of the building. There's impacts to students and student learning. And I know I hear from parents when there's a teacher that's continuously absent and out of the room, right? Asking about why that is. And I do think when we have a teacher out of the room and it impacts education, it looks different if it is a long-term medical leave versus it's here and there all over the place because you're thinking about consistency and continuity in instruction. And we've talked a lot about the idea of an NEA managed leave bank that works differently, and I don't know if that goes in addition to our current leave bank or we morph the whole thing. So my anxiety was, I feel like we are just potentially looking at taking our leave system down to the bones and rebuilding it to look very much the same or very much different, and it could have cost to it and planning pieces too. Even with adding one, if we would add one leave day, we have to work with our substitute, our contractor that provides substitutes to talk about that and building up, do that, because right now we're not hitting full subs all the time, right? So,
Well, interestingly enough, I did not see on your list of interest student education or student outcomes.
Yeah.
I did wonder about that. You're talking about it.
We talked about, we do have a, sorry.
I think
something
it's-
about workload and, on interests,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, absolutely it is. I think it's difficult to quantify, right? Like, I don't know that there's going to be data out there
We
that
have,
says.
yeah, classroom, impacts classroom learning and
Oh, good, good,
coworker
good.
workload on there.
Yeah, good.
So, absolutely, yeah.
And I know that obviously that's going to be a joint interest in not having a detrimental impact on that. So, yeah, it really is just something I told Amber, I feel like we need to throw back to the team because there are certainly pieces that don't. There are lists in these possible solutions that we could both look at, work with Stephanie, flesh out, that would not require more intense planning. But there are other pieces that, I can't just go to the board and be like, I gave everybody leave days, you get a leave day, you get a leave day, right? I have to come and present and show them information, and we really have to compare because, again, anything that's a major change, we would want to be looking at all lead group, all of our pay groups. And so.
I was going to mention that, we can't do something for just certified that we're not going to do for classified.
Right.
So that cost is going to be associated as well.
Right.
Well, it feels like it's hard to determine if some of these solutions are going to fix the problem or meet interest. They may or may not, because while you've got a lot of data, it's not pinpointed data, which makes it pretty difficult. Usually we would start by saying, process of elimination on the brainstormed ideas, which ones we just know don't touch the problem. But the problem's a little vague, right? The interests are more specific, but the problem itself, how do we make sure there's adequate leave time for professional employees? And I don't know when you guys framed and focused, if you described problems that are very specific and recurring, or it's more of a sense that younger teachers use and need leave for babies and children. And how it shows up in the data is sort of just not real pinpointed.
Because it's aggregate for a very large employee group.
So then thinking about, which one of these then relieve that, and who are you relieving it for, and how do you know if it works is a challenge. But like I was going to say, we generally would say, which one of these do we strike out as they don't really address the situation? They won't fix it, or we just know it's not doable, just straight off the bat, that it's one of those out there ideas, right? Or which one do we need to take which ones do we need to take a deeper dive at, whether it be data and or committee work or more long-term solution work? When you think about cost, that's where my head is right now. Anybody else want to say where they see this kind of going, or?
I would like to see a subcommittee to look at creating a leave bank, because I do think that will solve a lot of issues. Like the teachers that are new to the profession that don't have enough days, they could get days. People with the maternity leave issue, they could get days.
And when you say leave bank, separate than the sick leave bank?
Yes,
That's only for sustained illness or personal injury.
Yes, so this would be.
This would be for other.
Yes, so like if they needed days for maternity leave that they didn't have, those could be donated.
Which one of these is that idea?
I think it's having a leave bank managed by NEA and SMSD.
And so would you go ahead and continue to describe what you would have a finite list of things that would qualify for that?
Yes,
And what
and
would
I
it
know
be?
we can look at language from other districts, because Olathe has that. I have a whole bunch of language around that from other districts, around Kansas and other states, that kind of lists out how they run that and manage it.
And the nature of what kind of illnesses, or what?
It would be like if they ran out of sick days, or if they needed maternity leave days. It wouldn't be for extended leave, it would be.
For the short,
Yeah.
But when you say ran out of sick days, you mean they're bank sick days?
Yes.
Because you don't
Well,
differentiate?
the ones, if they're new teachers.
Yeah.
If they're new teachers, then they're just running out of days.
Yes.
Period.
Because 10 is not enough, because they keep routinely
so
getting sick, like they're getting recurring.
If a first-year teacher gets COVID and is out for
Yes, 5
5
or
or
10
so
days.
days, right?
I got it.
But then they get it again.
How
This
will
would
you
then
all,
alleviate
how
that.
will you all manage it, that the person who, or do you care, would you care, I'm just saying theoretically, would you care that it's someone that is, taking days off for various things that aren't sick, but then gets
Yes,
sick. Versus
absolutely.
the person who is sick.
Yes, they would still apply for those days. It
Yes.
just wouldn't be specifically from the district.
And there would be a committee
Right, but how?
that's sitting and making.
And so then
these-
you would be asking them about how they've used the days they don't longer have?
Yep. Or whatever,
asking
however
them?
other people would do it. We can look into how other
Yeah,
districts do
and
it.
they'd
that
have
could
to
be-
donate a day. They'd have to donate at least one day. So they are putting in
So
a
would that be
day.
donation, the bank you all are
Yes, it would be a
describing
donation.
donation-based?
Agreed, yes. For our main thoughts right now. We don't have one, so.
And I think
Can
the
make it
idea
whatever
with
we
that is that it should be a no cost, right? Because
Right.
Cost neutral.
overall, it's the same number of days for the group. I do think the management of it and how that works would have to be really carefully talked about. And
Liability-wise.
frankly, it may be something where the district says we don't want to be part of it at all. Like
Right.
NEA manages that.
In Olathe, is it joint managed or is it district
Yeah, it's
managed?
joint
You guys-
managed.
It's joint managed
Right.
as well in KCK. And then Goddard, down south, teachers run it by themselves,
Yeah.
so.
I think there may be some preference to do that, partially because there's already a board bank, but also just to not create employment liability issues for the
Right,
district.
right.
Like,
Underlying
that's
people
And
for-
I don't
an
think there's
outside
any
system.
Right.
pushback from NEA-Shawnee mission on us taking that on. We are okay with that.
And how much you could relieve or help this issue is going to depend on how much money you can raise in that bank.
Yeah, it would be determined on how many days are then donated.
So it'd sort of be a backstop for the problems that you've described that
Yes.
caused you all to bring this forward.
And I think another thing that would come about from that is we do have a lot of teachers that have been working in the district for a while and they have a lot of days, and so they feel like they need to use those days, so they're sometimes want to use those days and not lose them. And so I think a lot of people have said that they'd be willing to donate those days
I've
instead
heard
of using those days to get rid
Yeah.
of them before they might retire. So I think that would help too.
But there would need to be some coordination between the NEA and the district on moving those days to something that the.
Yeah, there would still
Right.
definitely be,
Communication.
right? and-
Yeah, they still have to opt somehow to let the district know what they're donating.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right,
It-
and I know, oh, sorry.
I just had a quick question.
No,
If
you're
it
good,
would be
Christy.
managed by NEA, would a teacher have to belong to NEA to be able to get the benefits?
I don't think so. I guess.
I just.
We would love for them to.
That is something we can look into, because I don't.
But again, that can be
If you're just-
discussions.
We need to look at we need to look at KCK and Olathe, because I don't know.
I don't
I
think
think
they put
anyone
that
can
they
be, as
have-
long as you've
yes,
donated
yeah.
a day.
I think
Right.
In
Right.
Olathe, for
think it
sure,
can be
you
a
don't
part
have
of
to be a
that.
member.
Anyone-
I would have to do some legal
Yeah.
research. Obviously,
Right.
if the district had its finger in it to any extent, we just can't do anything that, it's kind of like the establishment clause, like you can't
Discriminate.
encourage and you
Right.
can't discourage
Right.
membership.
And then you also have the discrimination liability potentially, in terms of the nature of the illness.
Right, that's why I'd want to be really careful with us having any, we already do take on some risk just by having,
Right.
which is why mostly those are mostly rubber stamped, right?
Right.
You apply, you get, you apply, you get, absent some very crazy specific situation.
And this might be more of a homework for the subcommittee, but reaching out to those districts that already have the bank.
Right.
And see,
Yeah. How they deal with that.
Yes.
Zoom and have them present how they've run it, how they started.
right,
it.
I mean, I'd be really interested just to see what factors do they use to truly determine, and what conversations do they have during those meetings on how they determine if somebody is eligible to use those days or not.
What feels attractive is the fact that it'd be something that you're going to sort of grow organically to address something that feels like the problem you've brought forward. It's not just a broad throwing out of additional days because you think it'll fix something, or it seems like it's fairly a targeted idea. But what do other folks think of this idea that haven't spoken up about it yet, but you've kind of been listening in? Any other thoughts on it?
I know I've been speaking, but I have one more thought. Sorry. So also just in terms of getting people to donate the days, as an experienced teacher with days built up, if I have more leave days, I'm also more willing to donate days to a bank, because I've been used to budgeting, for lack of a better way to phrase that, budgeting 10 days a year. And now if I have X amount more days a year, I'm more comfortable donating a day to buy into that bank.
So I think that the question that we need to figure out as a team is, do we want to have a subcommittee that sort of holistically can, like, what sort of level of scope would we want to give to a leave subcommittee, right? Like, you have all these possible solutions that you're going through. In which case, I don't know that it's feasible to have a holistic solution for the next upcoming P&A, because I think that it's possible that budgetary and operational planning things would have to happen. We also could put together a subcommittee that looks just at this donation-based bank and tries to potentially, and we all have very busy spring schedules, but tries to potentially bring forth a solution to be incorporated into this P&A, with the understanding that every year, first of all, each side gets to decide what issues they raise, but that it could, it could be raised again, or it could continue to be worked on. Obviously, it's not letting issues sit and fester is always good and is an interest, but, my conversation with Amber too was like, I want to make sure that whatever solution we have is holistic, right? That we're not like, oh, let's Band-Aid this, but then we're still going to look at these other things later. So I think we have to balance that and deciding
Are some
how
of
we
the
proceed.
education things, though, kind of no-brainer and actionable at this time? Or is it going to be complicated because there may be another piece, a potential bank? Can you still do education on the other pieces, even though you're still in flux on that idea?
I mean, something as simple as adding information to the P&A summary, to me, that's a no-brainer. That's easy.
Whoever's got this up, can we put in red the things that are educational?
Yeah.
Or highlight, however you want to do it, because that feels like I can't imagine there won't be consensus for an education piece on this, which I thought you all talked about this last year, education piece on leave.
We did, because that's why we have, at the beginning of the P&A, there is a 2-page, 1-page, I forget how long it is on the top of my head, with kind of those concerns, top issues that tend to come up. And that was part of our educational piece.
Is there an education piece on short-term disability that's up there?
Yeah, so we do actually have a good, there's a question of how many leave days do I get a year? It says you get 10. Don't forget though, you can use them for any reasons, but here's your blockout days. And then it notifies about bereavement leave. And then there's a question about what if you don't use all 10 of your days? And it says you can sell them back, but then accrued leave can be used for, your illness, illness of a family member, all those things. And maybe that we need to ask a question about, it says accumulated leave days may also be used while you were taking unpaid leave, like FML. So it may be that we need to have a question that do I get paid if I take FML? Maybe a more explicit, I would be happy to work on a more explicit, what if I'm going to have a baby or take long-term leave? You do not get paid, you need to save days for this.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So I'm thinking to open enrollment right now. And during, I know, sorry. And during open enrollment, you have the option to meet with a benefits counselors, I think their title. When you're first hired to the district and you're enrolling in benefits, because that's a different time than when open enrollment's happening, do they have the option to meet with one of those benefit counselors?
Yes.
Okay.
And they do it more in a whole group situation. But yes, those benefits conversations happen with Drew and/or Jennifer.
Because I'm thinking that's a potential time to discuss short-term disability and really those benefits of short-term disability. That's where that education piece could come in.
Yeah, I'm really explaining to them they're not going to have sick days when they come back. I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't think about. Oh, all my days are gone, and then they come back and a kid gets sick, and they don't have those days, is what I'm hearing. That making sure that they understand that when they come back from having their child or their baby, if they're coming back from maternity leave, that they understand that they're not going to have sick days left over because they've used all those.
Because you have to have depleted your entire bank before the benefit kicks in. So at the beginning of the school year, you would get your 10 days. Do you know if that starts?
So I just got back from maternity leave a year and a half ago. So I started in November, And because I hadn't started the year yet, my days didn't start until I'd gotten back. So when I got back, then I got those 10 days for the rest of that year. But all my days before that were all used up because of
Okay.
maternity leave.
So you just get 10 when you come back, whether it's the first contract day or,
Well, you'd
Yeah, I
have to,
think-
so if they start, like, so let's say the baby's not due till September, so they work for a little bit in August. Do they then get those 10 days for that year that they then have to use?
I thought we changed that
You
last
get two.
You get two, right, because then we're saving them for when they get back.
Correct. So it is kind of a complicated formula that
That's
Jennifer works through with the employees.
Yeah.
So,
Which is nice, because then you do still have some days, but you have used up all of your other remaining leave that you've saved. So
I mean,
it's a lot.
I know there's a lot of solutions that need flushed out. You know, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple sessions about people running out of days and you know, one of the solutions would kind of force people to save, and that is looking back at past practice that's been in the previous P&As about people have to have a set number of days in their bank before they can sell. I know there was some joint, I think I think everyone was somewhat interested in exploring that some more. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to, is there a combination of things that y'all want to do? Knowing, I think, what Rachel sort of described about the rate at which you can create a leave bank may not be instant. That may be something that's committee out to come back in the future about what that would look like. But the other things, are they worth going ahead and seeing where you might have consensus? And is there anything that comes off this list? Before you just take a look at.
Yes. Taking leave by the hour
Yeah.
needs to be struck out.
can you share, you
10
did
days or
some-
days and adding 5/6/bereavement days. I would
Yeah.
also take that out.
Because coverage is not possible.
Yeah, that's not, yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It creates, the
nightmare,
sub situation would be a
sure.
nightmare, but our payroll department also, everything they do is calculated on half day and full day. And so we would, I think, cause some mass chaos within our payroll department as well.
And what else did you guys say comes off? 10 days?
So with with the take leave by the hour, before we completely strike that, the one thing potentially to explore is, I know principals typically will allow an employee to leave, like if I had an appointment at like 4 o'clock and I needed to leave 20 minutes early. Principals have been very flexible on that. My fear with that is principals allowing some to do that and some not to do that. So is there a possibility to explore an MOU or a collective commitment on, hey, if you need to leave X amount of hours early, is that okay?
I have a lot of trepidation about something like that because it is so dependent on what the day looks like, how often that person asks to do that.
What their end-of-day duties
I
are.
want to leave a huge
Right.
amount of discretion on principals to do that, but I do want consistency. I just
And that's
don't know
my fear is the
how you rate that.
consistency.
I do think it makes sense that that's like a principal training piece to make sure that every principal knows that they have authorization to do that and should do it where it's common sense. But I think there's probably a joint interest in doing that because if it's something where you can cover or make ends
Right.
meet, then a person doesn't have to take a half-day leave, you don't have to get a
Right.
sub. So there's probably a
It's
mutual
better consistency
benefit
for kids,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah.
to doing that.
Who has got the screen up taking notes? Is that?
I'm moving things around.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, John.
Are you going to capture this idea? That this is a sort of a,
It's already happening.
Yeah.
is nothing that need to educate all principals or
No, I don't
kids?
think so.
Already in the mix, okay. When I said anything else come off, you guys struck adding 5 days of bereavement and adding additional sick days. You struck that because?
We want
'Cause we
days
want
or
it to be days
days
or
to
days.
stay
Yeah.
consistent.
That's right.
We have a packet up here.
So that's same.
I do want to share with everyone that Dr. Higgins did do homework on that hour by hour thing. So just so it doesn't like feel like we're getting to traditional, he actually sent me a whole memo on looking in, so I appreciate you doing that work, but he talked to our people and he talked to other districts that do it, and he thoroughly looked into whether it was something that he felt like we could have a discussion about and have on the table, but what you sent me back did not look good. So.
Let's talk about the start teachers with a certain number of days in a bank and add to everyone's bank. What was that?
I think that was if we were going to add days, how would we make it equitable to everybody? So new teachers and teachers that were already working in the district. So we decided to add days.
Well, so
to
that
the
goes
10.
along with the first solution, add some days to the current sick and personal leave bank?
Yes and no. So there's a couple different ways of looking at this. Like, you could take our 10 days and add 2 days to it. That then gives people 12 days to use.
Right.
Or you could say, well, instead of putting those 2 extra days on your current temp, they just go into your bank,
Your sick bank.
into your accrued leave. So you can't use them
This
for
year-
personal leave.
And you can't sell them
take a
back.
And you can't sell them back.
Those
But
would
they're
just be
there
sick
in your
days.
bank for future illness, for when you want to have, it helps to build that bank up.
Yeah.
I think that's how those two differentiate.
Okay, sure, that is definitely.
And it also was like going off of based of how Olathe does it, where how many years you've been teaching, you get more days added to your sick bank for the number of years you've been teaching.
You could do it that way, or you can do blanket. Yep. Is that coming off, or is there some traction in that in terms of giving people extra time? It feels like what is alike about that one and the first one is, who and how are you impacting?
Yeah.
Right, I mean, it doesn't target anything, other than, you know, you could be someone that doesn't need the extra time, you don't have small children anymore, you're not having children, and you get 2 extra days, it's not targeted.
Right.
You guys, what do you want to do with that one? What do you want to do with that one, and what do you want to do with the first one, understanding they're not necessarily tied?
Again, I think that is something that, I don't know, to the extent it was like, that we would do a one-time, I have not talked at all with the finance department, or done any level of homework on like a one-time ad, like you start in Shawnee Mission with this number of days. I'm sure the initial cost would be very large, though. I assume it would be
Right,
cost prohibitive
yeah.
to just absorb into this year's budget. So again, I think that these are things that,
I just wonder if
again,
an extra day impacts anything.
one extra day for every
About
person.
Yeah, I mean-
or about $390,000 worth.
Oh, you mean like?
Like in terms of fixing the problem of
Right.
running out of time for.
Initially, no.
It wouldn't for those younger teachers who haven't
gives
had
another day.
time to
It gives them
build the
another
day. I know there was a point made about, well, if I as a veteran teacher now have an additional day, I've budgeted for 10, so I would be more willing to donate.
I see this one as a one-time thing. When you get hired in the district, you get, right now we have 10, you might get a few extra days when you get hired. But I think we kind of are looking to see, can we just, instead of start having 10 days a year, have, I'm just throwing out a number, 12 days a year, 13 days a year. It's a
That number
recurring
stays the same.
13 days instead of just here's an extra.
A one-time.
3 days. That's how I read this.
Right, no, I think both would be possible solutions. They just come with different impacts, right?
Right.
And
And
different
what we're really
benefits.
what we're trying to accomplish. Like, if we're trying to get people to build their banks for situations that arise,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that giving 12 days gets us that, because we know some people are just going to burn through the 12 days. So what levers could we pull that would allow or force people to build up their bank
Well, that goes back to the one having a certain number before you can buy back.
before you can sell them
But
back?
it's also
I think the
gets
leave
back to-
bank,
Yep.
the leave bank that we talked about, that is,
And it goes back to the education piece too, truly educating new to the profession teachers that high importance of not using all of your days.
Which maybe isn't really getting nailed in what Rachel read.
You mean in that one-page summary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and maybe it is, but also, I go back to the comment I made earlier that, some of our Gen Z employees that may not,
Right.
Right.
they may not care.
honestly-
They may want to take their days.
New to the profession, Y'all, my first year, I've never been that tired in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
that is the most
It's a really good point.
exhausting
Yeah.
year ever.
Absolutely.
So,
And we want people to be able to.
Yes.
to
Right.
have the flexibility to use those days when they need to.
right.
Right.
And I think it's
But also plan for the future as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and adjusting to teaching, like,
Yeah.
student teaching is not the same as being a teacher in a classroom. Like, it is way more stressful, there's way more on you, and I think that people need to take those days to get away and refresh their mental
Yeah.
health, because it is
Quickly
very
recharge.
stressful. You
It's a
know, being
lot.
a teacher right now is very stressful.
But yeah. I don't know. So that's how those two differentiate. I don't know.
What about jump up to the, have a certain number of days banked in order to buy back?
We talked about that last year. We talked about potentially having people bank, what was it, like 3, or like keep 3 in their bank before they were able to then buy back. I don't feel like we got anywhere with it because we mentioned that we'd done that earlier.
It used to be 50.
Yeah, it used to be a really high number.
Like, they had to have 50 in their bank before they could sell
And then
the
I
current
think
year leave back.
The thing was, just again, like, parents have to take days for their kiddos. I've used 5 days this year, and I haven't been sick. My kids have been sick. So just, and then your first year teachers, they get sick because germs and all those stipulations, so. I don't know if it needs to be 50, but if we're going to consider that maybe a lower number.
And I think we can look at that data on the
Within a-
average number that people currently have available to them, and just using that data, try to find, this is gonna sound really traditional bargaining, I'm sorry, but trying to find a good common ground on where we can put that.
What, like having 50 before you can sell back, if you're nowhere near 50, you have no incentive to not use your time.
Right.
Because you're
True.
not ever make it to sell back for a long
Right.
time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about it instead of traditionally, like, you know, what is the number that would be effective to have people,
Well, and
you know, want to, because part of the buyback is don't use it so you can sell it, right?
the intention for that, right? The true intention of having that bank is not compensation.
No.
And we have already a whole robust discussion about that when we increased it to 75, right?
Yes.
So it is not compensation. It's there for when you need it because you cannot be at work. And so, I mean, it's intended to be used for those things
yeah.
like FML, like caring for a, child, all of those things. The other thing about that is that if we are at a place where we're having a donation-based bank managed by the association, that would probably help with less, having to dive into people's personal situations.
Yeah.
Because it would be less circumstances where someone has been irresponsible.
Right.
What do you want to do with that? Is it worth thinking through or having a group think through? Like, what's the number? What doesn't feel arbitrary, or do you think it's going to have an impact enough to come up with a number on how many you need to have before you?
So just take pregnancy, for example. I believe it's 6 weeks.
6 to 8.
Huh?
6 to 8.
6 to 8 weeks, right?
Cesarean's 8.
6 to 8 weeks. So, that's 30 days.
It's a lot of days. And then after, it just depends on how much you're, like, very few people are going to go through a whole year to bank all 10 days to save that up.
Right. So, at 6 weeks is 30 days banked up. Is that, I think that's a good talking piece. I think 50 is maybe a little too much to have banked. It's great when you get to that point where you have to have all 50 of those days, but.
As of right now, like, again, I've used 5 days this year because my kid has been sick. So if I don't use any more days, my husband, thankfully I have one of those, could take days. That's still going to take me, 6 years to get, no, more than that. I can't math today. Is it 6 years? Thank you, John. Yes, 6 years to bank those days.
To get to 30.
Right, and that's just saying I'm consistently using that 5 days for whatever.
Was the buyback originally done to try to incent teachers to be in the classroom more often? I'm guessing it's worse.
We talked about increasing the rate we increased the rate last year from 50 to 75
But
for
part of it
buyback.
is to address attendance, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So then if you have it where you have to have 30 days before you can sell back, is your attendance going to get worse? Because people aren't even in the realm of being able to sell back.
Well, and I
Does
would
that make sense?
argue 75.
I see what
So
you're-
they're going to take their days off instead of saving the days.
I see what you're saying. it's one of those, I don't know if we're gonna know until we
Till we do
Do
it.
something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I can see, yeah, that happening. But I can also see people wanting to save up to get to that number.
True.
So I think there's gonna be a mix, and until we truly have hard data and have done it,
And maybe it's not 30, maybe it, 20. That's a
Yeah.
month. That's 4 weeks.
I feel like
And
that's, yeah.
that's what I was
Do
gonna
what?
ask.
The
is
average?
If we can bring that back up, and I think we can look at that to help us determine the number.
But I mean, I would also say like $75, even if you sell that back, $75 plus that tax that's taken out, like, I'm not
No.
saving up to,
No.
saving up to buy, to sell those days. Like,
will
I'm saving up
say-
to use those days as opposed to sell them.
As
so.
an early career teacher, before I truly understood the importance of banking days, my thought process went to, it was $50 then. I have 4 days. I could use $200 extra dollars. And I sold back with that process, that's like the thought process that went through my brain as a first year teacher.
When you say until you understood the value of saving up, when did that light bulb come on for you and why? I mean, just curious, because that's part of your education piece.
I would say when I paid off my student loans.
That's when you got mature enough, you mean?
Yeah,
to,
that's
like-
honestly, I mean, financially mature enough is how I'll phrase
We
that.
both, I feel
I
that.
was gonna say, some of us be paying them off till
I know,
we're
I'm sorry.
50.
With that too, I would say when you're
I'll never be mature.
feeling more confident as a teacher, which I'd say is about year 4 to 5.
Yeah,
As
it
well.
takes a while, yeah.
When I'm feeling more confident in my job duties as a teacher and can start thinking more of my personal and financial well-being.
Yeah, when you're a more adultier adult.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Anyway,
You guys got to tell me where you want to go with that one. Whether or not you want to dig deeper or explore a certain number of days. Or is that something you want to think about again after you come up with some sort of
well, I mean, the thing
draft
is,
on a sick bank?
even if we talk about adding that certain number of days, just depending on where that money would then come from and how all that will be allocated would be the bigger issue. So,
I feel like this is a little bit tied to the idea of a sick bank.
yes.
That was my concern,
Yes.
is like, I don't want anyone to, and again, the anxiety I had was like, I don't want anyone to feel like there's delay or
Yeah.
whatever, but,
Right.
so
Yep.
like, we have these options of like, going through this list and saying, hey, we think these things are good now, but my concern is just that, again, if we do want to have a subcommittee that has a larger scope, it might be helpful to have all available solutions on the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think right now, I mean, we've identified, some problems that exist. I don't know that we know the scope of those problems, but we do have a sick bank. Again, these are not employees that are being terminated because they're at day 11, so
Can you
I just
put-
want to make sure we do it correctly and that we don't, if there's things that we move forward with right now, that it doesn't make it difficult to come up with a solution later.
So whoever's writing the subcommittee responsibilities, can you put an asterisk up above the solutions that are going to the subcommittee so we can see what we still haven't talked about? We've sort of randomly said, adding days to current sick and personal leave. I don't know that anyone's dug deep on that or if there's any traction. I don't know if that one comes off. It's kind of a shot in the dark. What does it
I
accomplish?
think that would be a send to, I think that'd be a send to the work group. I'm not in a place where I feel like as a representative, I can give any level of thumb on that.
I do not want to cross that one off.
No.
You do not want to cross it off, right?
No, I want to keep that as a possible solution, add some days to current sick and personal leave.
Okay, so let's come back to that and think about what is the next step on exploring it. But the other two things that are left on here, add loss of pregnancy to bereavement.
We have addressed that issue. That is more of an interpretation issue than it is a negotiation issue, and we've clarified that the district has and will continue to interpret our bereavement leave policy to, when it refers to loss of a child, to include
Oh, that's
during
already
pregnancy.
something that's being done.
And that we're going to educate administrators and staff on taking that instead of
So
sick
does that
leave.
drop under education piece?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we're back at, sort of what you, I think, described really well, is starting teachers with a certain number of days in a bank and add to everyone's bank. Is that something that is looked at?
I almost think you could take the idea of adding days as two different approaches to current
Right.
year or to the bank.
Right,
Yes.
right.
So
Agreed.
both of them are adding days, but they're different buckets, different approaches.
They cost very different money too.
They cost different money as well.
And what's the next step of exploring that? We're certainly don't have the information to even see if we have consensus. You don't have any cost, you don't have how much, you don't have the whys. But if folks don't have consensus on marking it out, for the folks that feel like you wouldn't mark it out, how would you continue to explore it in a way that you could see if it's viable in terms of addressing the problem and something that's feasible, manageable, affordable, and doable?
Maybe the subcommittee?
And what would that subcommittee look for?
I think there'd be a lot of talking about the benefit of leave. Like, I think, as I think about what that committee would do, I think you would start at the benefit of leave, why we have it, what it's for, how much you need. There'd be a lot of data that needs to be gathered about other districts, but, I mean, also frankly, there'd be a lot of work that would have to happen outside of that because we'd have to dig into it for every single pay group. And also just, you know, it is not a trade-off for compensation. It would impact available funds. Like,
Yes.
I mean,
That's my big thing is
there is a
if
cost
it's not
to
going to come
it.
out of if it's not going to come out of compensation, which I agree, I don't believe it should. Where does it then come from? And
I mean,
what is it then
it
going to
comes from the
impact?
big it
Right,
comes from the big
right.
operating budget, right? So it's not, it wouldn't be a presentation like you have to pick, but ultimately it would reach into every single person's pocket.
Right.
And we'd have to decide that
Does
that's
it
something that
address
we
the
would want.
problem? Does just putting extra days to leave address the problem of people not having enough days when you don't have the data to see how many enough days do people not have? Like, for example, if you're 31 people that took 156 days out of the district bank, if that is on average 5 days per person, but we don't really know if that really was 5 days per person, or if it was 3 for some and 7 for others, or 50 for one person. There's just not enough information to know what fixes the problem, because you just don't have the pinpointed data.
And I don't know if
you did, I don't know that you could.
I don't think we could, because there's also going to be teachers that are coming to school when they shouldn't, because they don't want to get docked. Because they're sick, they're still coming to school because they don't want to get docked. So I don't think that data is ever going to be fully possible.
Yeah.
Because I mean, as an early career teacher, there were days I probably shouldn't have come to school. I wasn't feeling well, but I still did.
Sub-plans, man.
Would the theoretical bank that you all are talking about creating separate from the district bank, would it cover the one-off days that I'm sick and I have nothing left, just a one day?
In theory.
In theory, yeah.
I mean, in theory, this seems like the thing that can, in other words, give people what they need versus a blanket idea that it might feel good to get everybody 2 extra days, but
then
some people don't need it, some people it's not enough.
And then at the same time, I do think that if we add more days, we're going to have more people willing to donate to that bank. So in some ways, I do believe that combining those two, that we have that sick leave bank and adding some days to the current sick and personal leave will help with that interest. Kind of like, again, I can't just think about me personally, I have to think about the bargaining unit as a whole. But personally, as someone who has a decent amount of days banked up, it's a no-brainer, especially if I have more leave available to me, that I'm going to donate a day.
I hear what you're saying. I think those two things under the subcommittee could be tied together as well. Like, as whoever's reviewing requests, like, I would actually give more credence to someone who's made an effort to bank days over their career rather than, oh, they just burn all their days every single year and now they're coming to ask for more days.
Definitely.
They won't be asking for days if they're banking them.
Maybe, but maybe not as well.
I see your point on that too. Like if it comes down to, say, pregnancy, then yeah, there's more of a chance they're going to run out of their days and be asking for that. And if they just had a pregnancy, have taken their maternity or paternal leave, and then are coming back the next school year, only have their 10, oh no, I got COVID twice, that's 10 days. So. I mean, that's a pretty big hypothetical.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was really stretching there, but it is.
But a request for just I burned all 10 of my days, and now I'm sick, and I'm going to go to the committee to ask for more. I probably wouldn't want to sit on that committee to approve or deny that, because
Yeah. I think you guys need time to sit and think about that. I would never be on that committee.
Well, I would
It's
definitely
gonna
talk
be
to
a challenge.
Olathe. They have a really
Yeah.
extensive.
Yes, they do.
Long-term bank. Long-term meaning they've operated it for a long time. I wasn't clear whether it was joint or whether it was just the NEA.
That's
but-
joint.
I mean,
But
I
they
think
do have
there'd
the
be a lot of
challenge of
work
getting people to opt
to
into
put
it.
into that and what it looks like. And I do think, I mean, there needs to be a lot of time and space to consider, where ultimately dollars are best spent. Because adding days for everyone will impact the budget and will ultimately impact available money. So if it, for pay raises for all groups, if it's budgeted in. So, it's just something to think about. If it's a acute problem for younger teachers, right, is that where we want to target it, or do we want to spread it across, understanding that that's going to impact our operating fund? But they're big decisions, and they're decisions that the administration would have to bring the board along in and have to be doing long-term multiple session education on. Because it is, and again, something I shared with Amber is future administration and future board is never going to be able to take away leave days, right?
Never gonna be able to
Right.
what?
They're never going to be able to take away leave days. That's, political suicide. You can't do that. So if it's there, and it impacts the budget and available funds forever. So it's a big thing that needs to be really closely studied and considered to make sure that we have a solution that fits, and that's sustainable
Yeah.
over time, because, it impacts future employees. There's just no way to step down on that. So,
So subcommittee, with lots
So
of
then
work
let's
to
talk
do.
about what does is that a separate subcommittee on those two issues, the top issue and the fourth one down? Or no,
so
are there two different committees, I guess I'm asking?
Tied so closely.
I think you have to study it together, and
Yeah.
I agree.
I think you have to start it, I think they have to go off what they typically do, which is go off of our notes, but really get right to
Get
bare
in there,
bones of
yeah.
what is leave for, what do we need it for, where are we having our problems, and then start going through and studying these things.
And I think I'm assuming several of us at this table, or these tables
Oh, yeah.
technically, are gonna be sitting on that committee anyway. So we were a part of this discussion and can
Yes.
bring those ideas in and what's already been talked about, so I'm not really too concerned.
You're going to have to use, the subject matter experts that can dig
Yeah.
deep on the information for you as a committee, too.
So do we wanna start forming our committee?
Yeah, let's do that.
I think that's where this is going.
When do you guys envision, and again, it is important to me, we don't have delay, that we get working on this. Things always take longer than you think they
Yes.
will. But do you envision we start this now, or do you envision we start it next semester?
Now?
Probably
Now.
start as soon as
Yes,
possible.
I agree.
Okay, so just thinking about that as people.
If the committee decides to survey teachers, because I could see that naturally at some point, a committee would want to know teachers' needs, try to dig deeper with them. If your survey is, would you like 2 additional days?
It's
You
gonna
don't-
be
well,
yes.
yes. Don't
We
need to
don't
survey.
have to survey that.
Right, and then you also have privacy issues in terms of surveying to find out, you're trying to provide folks enough leave for their individual need with one uniform policy. So I'm just thinking that I know the committee's going to at some point want teacher input. Be mindful about how and what you want that for.
Yeah. I think it's maybe more, if you go and ask, it's like, what solution would you be like, what do you see as the biggest benefit of these solutions? What would you be more likely to use? Would you donate days?
Would you donate is a good question. I do know in Olathe they struggle with that because you opt into donations when you're hired on. And if people didn't understand the importance or just didn't think it was important when they hired on, they're not participating.
Right.
Well, I thought I read in there that each year, and they can be asked each year.
Yeah, they just started that, where now during open enrollment for healthcare.
Yes.
They send out an email or something else saying, hey, you didn't do this when you hired on, please do this now.
Yeah,
And I don't know how
that's-
it's turned out for them. It's only been like 2 years.
I mean, again, I would assume that's how we would go about it.
Yeah. So what does timeline look like for this? And then let's talk about the committee.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's something that's going to start meeting in the short term. Again, without having the benefit of Allison here, I mean, but they start budget planning at the beginning of the school year, you know, so, and again, we've got 2 new board members. I'm going to need a lot of time because to educate the board, to bring the board up to date, to give them time to sit and think and marinate on it. Again, even adding 1 leave day, that is the day that we will never go back on. So just, you know, and also time for a group separate from this subcommittee, again, to look at all pay groups. So, I mean, I would probably encourage, if it's something that we would want to get into a P&A for not next year, but the year after, that the sooner we have a solution or recommended solution, the better. It's mostly going to be HR heavy, Dr. Higgins. We're going to need some HR professionals, you know, that serve on that, so.
And I can't imagine you all want to do this committee work over the summer.
That was my question, and it's.
Are you wondering about the sick leave? Thinking you need it more time with a certain number of days to buy back days? Or are you thinking of just adding additional days to?
I don't know. I don't know because they haven't had an
How does it all fit
opportunity.
together?
It kind of sounds like you're thinking it might take longer than we have, especially if we want to try to ratify it before the end of the school year. Do we break it apart and do something now and kind of see how it starts for the next school year and then continue with the other ones throughout the year to develop it and develop it right? Or
John,
Are
can
they
you
all
scroll
really
back down?
tied together?
And again,
Amber?
that is
Amber's got
totally
it.
a possibility.
Got it.
To have a subgroup that meets now and really focuses on that issue and tries to get it done. My concern is we've now taken a possible solution off the table, right? And I'm concerned frankly about having a subgroup that goes in that's like, our goal is to add additional days, because we've already taken these other things off the table, and this is the only thing we're here to talk about.
I think your best chance of getting buy-in from the board eventually and doing something really hard is going to be having a comprehensive plan to present to the board. One that you've thought through, all the things the committee should think through on how doing one lever, I like how you called that, like, right? What lever what are you impacting? They've really got to see how you've thought this through and how the request is a logical one that addresses the issue. And if it's more than one solution, more than just the bank, and it's other things, how did you come to that determination? How did you come to that conclusion?
And I'm wondering if we did a bank, if that might solve some of the problems. Like if we started with that bank where people volunteered, it might actually solve the problem of people not needing additional days, because they would be able to ask for additional days. And just to me, just because people who need days, the people who are banking days don't need days, so they don't need additional days. It's the people that are running out of those days are the ones that need those days, whereas we have people that have extensive extra days that have been working for the district for a while that are willing to probably, from what I've heard, donate those days. Those days would go to the new teachers that don't have those days. So I'm wondering if
So you're feeling like
that,
maybe you could go forward sooner than later with the bank concept?
I think so.
I mean, again, I don't have I'm not gonna have the finance department breathing down my neck that this is messing up their entire budget, right? And again, because it's an established concept in other districts, again, in terms of getting information to the board and talking through to them, I think that's a little bit easier. And again, any party can raise any issue they want every single year, right? So there's never an issue that you're saying is off the table. I just worry if we I think I'm a little bit concerned about, let's put a subcommittee together, really focus on this issue of a donation leave bank, and then have a subcommittee that continues to meet to talk about other solutions.
It makes those other solutions going to be less viable if they're not tied to a bank, if that makes any sense at all. They're going to be random standalone solutions that look like ask instead of comprehensive. That's my third-party perspective. I don't know.
So,
I haven't heard much from folks on this side of the table. I know you've got some thoughts there and probably words of wisdom. What are you thinking by listening to this conversation?
Well, I'm thinking, again, I'm agreeing with some of my other co-workers here, that, again, by looking and comparing with other districts, it's kind of, get some input on how they've worked this out. That'll be very, very helpful. And then see how that's kind of, how that might work with our district. That might
the bank
speed,
concept.
yeah, right. That might speed things up because, again, we're talking with other people that have had experience with this.
So it may be an impactful thing to do,
Right.
minus the other things. What about you? Thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely see the tug of war there in terms of that balance of providing the opportunity for teachers to be able to have the ability to dip into that in circumstances where it warrants it, but without having the backside of it in terms of where that other lever pulls. I don't know that I have much to add.
Yeah.
I mean, if the overall goal is to help make sure that people are banking days, it would make sense to then give them additional days. But I do understand where does that come from, and I understand that absolutely affecting everything from here on out. But to me, the leave bank wouldn't address that issue because, again, they're not banking days then, they're just borrowing them because they've used them all. So.
So really, we're at a decision point of what do we do with the subcommittee?
Yes.
And how much kind of space and room do we want to give them? Do we see this as a short-term focus on looking at donation leave bank and maybe even possibility of having to have a certain number of days before you sell back? Or do we want it to be bigger, understanding that it's going to take more time? Bigger in scope? And include other possible solutions.
Bigger in scope as in adding those, like if we start with adding the additional days and then the overall effects of that.
And
I think
saying-
it would be bigger in scope because again, if we're looking at attempting to help employees bank leave and bank more sick days, you have to give them those, so.
Well, if you're going to ask folks to donate a day to the bank, you take them down to 9 days available for them,
Right.
which when you start comparing 9 to other districts, you do get into the competitive question.
Yep.
It's hard to look at these things in an isolated way.
And in some ways, it's like, well, we could start a bank, see how it works, see if we don't think we have enough participation. Or again, it might be like, we think we know how it's gonna go if we don't, so we wanna, we wanna have a subcommittee work on all of those things, so. We've been going for like an hour and 45 minutes.
I was gonna say, we need a, I need a break.
Do you
That'd
guys
be
wanna
great.
take like 15 and maybe marinate on like,
Yeah.
where we wanna,
Yeah.
what kind of subgroup we want?
And also, how are you going to set yourselves up for success with the board and with your teachers? How are you going to set yourself up for buy-in from both? Buy-in on responsible use of sick time, buy-in on this potential donation of sick time, and then buy-in from the board on the whole thing or wherever you go with it, if you think it makes sense. So it's a tough one. It's 2:45. Can we return at 3 o'clock?
Yes.
Yeah.
before we went on break, we were talking about whether or not.
There you go.
Before going on break, we were talking about whether or not we pull a committee together to look at the creation of a sick bank, separate from district sick bank, with different qualifications, and determine who might run it and how it might run. And I assume then come back here with a report. And if that could be done within this bargaining cycle, or perhaps look at a longer-term, comprehensive, bigger picture way of approaching leave time that may include this, but may also include pieces of other options that we've identified when we brainstormed. And we sort of talked about the importance of bringing the board into the process at some point in a way that's thorough and comprehensive, and sort of pros and cons around which way to go.
I think it needs to be more of the longer term one. That way we can just reestablish things and have it set. So.
And what do you mean by that?
The sick bank, along with just adding the additional days, because again, giving us more days, you're going to allow teacher to bank more days, which is going to be able to allow people to then donate days, and it's kind of a snowball effect from there, I feel like.
You mean, you feel like if you have the option of looking at adding additional days to folks, that would be part of a fuller plan on creation of the sick bank?
Yes.
That you would seek buy-in for?
Yes.
And then there was a third one that the committee could potentially look at, and that was, do you want to look at folks having a certain amount in their bank before they're able to buy back?
Yes.
That would be included in a charge of the committee as well?
I would include that, why not? I think
Yeah,
that would
if
be,
you
I think that
determine
would
that
be,
it's-
yeah, I think that would be reasonable as well, so.
So you're sort of saying, let's just really take it on thoroughly, it may take longer,
If
but
we're
let's
gonna
do
do
all.
it, we might as well do it.
Other thoughts?
I mean, that personally, again, when I think about the anxiety that we all have around negotiations, like, I think we're in a really weird place if we haven't fully vetted out. I mean, clearly the association is saying we have an interest in a solution that looks like this, that has more leave days. And my fear is that if we don't have that on the table as the subcommittee is working, then we end up just sort of taking this one step forward, and then there's going to be pressure on the association to bring that issue forward in future years, but we've done this partial solution. And I think that's weird. And it's going to be difficult for
But if we do
this
the
team.
long-term work, then we can at least, if we bring it up
Yes.
next year, we'll at least have a potential solution to then
Yes.
go on with. So I don't want to have a partial thing now to have to deal with later.
Yes.
If we can agree to set up a subcommittee, really delve into this subject, and then have it solved, even if it's not solved with it by the end of this year. So even if we have to bring it up next year to then actually
Yes.
finalize it, I would assume people would be okay with it.
I think that gives us the ability to really get creative
Yeah.
and innovative with our approaches as well, and really look at some things that allow us or help us to recruit and retain around this issue. So, and if that means taking more time to really get it right that works for all parties, I think that that's a positive thing.
And there's precedent. I mean, we have done this, right? We've spent 3 years on the elementary bill. I mean, there's precedent for it, and it's because we want
No one did
to be
decide.
careful.
Yes.
It is because we want to be careful, right?
Right.
And we need to bring people along, and we want to make sure it's the right thing, because again, sometimes once you've done something, going back is
Hard.
is difficult. And there's a lot of, I mean, I cannot underscore enough how much pressure there is on the 10 individuals in this room, because we hear things from a lot of different directions, and when something's solid in the P&A, that, you're just walking in mud to make changes from there on out, so.
But yeah, I vote we do it or we just leave it.
Oh,
the
can
way it
I,
is, so.
I'm so sorry, but I wanted to make sure we get this on the record. Jill kindly sent me an email, and you guys may already be aware of this, but I did want to share. Our P&A is 50 pages, so I don't know every single word. Jill might, because she sent me an email about this issue of flexibility, right? And I talked about if we have something solid that says if it's only this long, then anytime you want to, you can, and how we need to, probably needs to be some level of administrative discretion in there. And she pointed out to me that there is language in the P&A in Article 8, Section A8, that is exactly sort of what we were talking about. Now I've lost my page number. If anyone gets to Article 8.
Article 8.
Section A8, and we can read it.
My internet would work.
Okay, here it is. So this is at page 21, a little more than halfway down, and it says, there's a sentence that says, "The building administrator has the authority to allow a professional employee to occasionally leave the building briefly during designated contract."
Oh, okay, cool.
Perfect.
Love that.
So it is in there, and clearly if one administrator was ignorant about it, we might have others, so we will put a pin in, like, let's make sure that they know. I mean, again, it seems pretty common sense to me that they would have that, but it is hard-coded in the P&A that they have that, so.
That makes my
No
concerns
principal has to
easier
say, I can't
from
do
earlier.
that.
Yeah, I think
Because
that's-
they can.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Eases my concerns from earlier, so we're good.
So,
So can whoever was sharing the notes, let's make sure that if you all have consensus that this should be some committee work, and that the committee, it sounds as though, should come back, I'm imagining next year, and early in the process, report back to this team to put it back on the table, the issue statement with a potential recommendation for a solution. But I want to make sure that the notes capture what all the committee has
Yeah.
sort of got authority to entertain. And I know it was, add additional days, and that could be either just blanket days, or it could be days to bank, right? Maybe a combination of both. It was require folks to have a certain amount banked before they can do buyback or sell back, and what would that number be and why? And then, of course, the creation of a potential sick bank and who and how it would operate. Was there another thing besides that in the notes that this committee, we still wanted the committee to be able to have as a tool? And that's why I wanted to kind of see those notes whenever someone can get
Yeah,
on.
I
can-
have in my notes.
I got it.
Because I think the other stuff was education and things you marked off. I don't think there was anything left for that committee to be able to
Yeah.
potentially utilize if they thought it made sense.
I guess my question is on the add additional days to the sick and personal leave. Is that something that really needs to be at subcommittee, or is that something that we can talk about here?
I think you could talk about it. And I think that if you got consensus that you wanted to do it, you would have to understand how you get agreement by the board and how it would impact what funds are available for salary this year. And I think you were giving feedback that you felt like it's pretty short notice, or did you want to speak more on that?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you're asking John about the issue of adding about the possible solution of adding a temporary leave day, so going from 10 to 11 or from 10 to 12.
Yeah.
So my concern there is that I don't feel like I have adequate information yet to carry the board along and bring the board along to that. I don't feel like we have done study on other pay groups, because if we have historically, I'll use our health insurance benefit as analysis. We've had discussions in here about what if professional employees want to do this and have more covered or less covered, and then shouldn't that be fine and we can leave the other pay groups? I do think some level of consistency across our pay groups is really important, and I don't think we have the runway to like check that. And frankly, it may be that as our human resources administrators do a study and start looking at it, maybe they say this leave group has the right amount of leave. But they may say, well, if we're comparing, across pay groups and we want to give roughly the same benefit, we got to add, and then that's going to have a cost too. And then also the reason why I have the finance department look at the cost is to say, is this nominal that we can fit into our budget that we currently have? And the answer is no, it's not. I mean, it's a big enough cost that we can't budget for it at this point in the budget cycle. And we had gotten to this point the last meeting that I just felt really weird and awkward about, which was trading it off for what's on the table for professional employee comp increases. And I don't think the board's going to be comfortable with that sort of thing. One, because it doesn't take into account the other interests of really thinking about the impact on operation, on student learning, on the classroom. It's acting like it's money, right? It's something to be traded for compensation. And I think we have to look at it bigger picture than that. And that'd be the only way to budget it in. And I don't think, I I know the board doesn't view it as compensation, it's a benefit, and they want the benefit to fit right. So that's my concern about it. I'm not saying we couldn't do a lot of work and try and get there. I just want my reservations to be out there. So I'm totally willing to continue the IBB process. I'm willing to do my work, just like we ask you guys to do your work with the group that you represent. I just don't have, a high level of confidence that I can get there in the time we have left. Now, we've set a goal. I mean, I say this, I don't want to, but I will say this, we've set a goal of finishing negotiations. We don't have to do that. That's an artificial deadline we put on ourselves. We do not have to do that. And so if we think that it is time sensitive enough, we could break for the summer, let a group do work over the summer, and come back in the fall. So that's out there too. I don't see that as desirable, but that's because I'm a direct whatever that thing is, I want to get the job done and check the box. So that's there too.
I know I have an interest for our bargaining unit to try to get somewhere with leave this negotiation cycle. I do think we can see where the committee gets. And as a team, depending on how far that committee gets, if we feel like we want to, at that point, move on and say, hey, let's push this off to the next negotiation cycle, again, as a team, if we decide that's fine, I'm fine with that. And then as a team later on, if we decide, hey, we're there, we're really close, let's meet another 1 or 2 times to get there, I think there's benefit in let's talk about it and see how far can we get.
So go in optimistic that it's possible, that it's really efficient, and that before our last meeting, you can come back and say,
Yeah.
I think we can do this.
And I mean, I'll have, even today, I can say a few things that I know I'd want to know just to see. So we can even start homework as between the next negotiations meeting.
So we should think about, so then it says we're not going to make a hard decision on whether we do something this year or next year. If the committee can get together frequently enough, get their hands on the information they need to come up with something you feel like is viable and something the committee would have consensus on recommending here, and then see where it goes from there. Do we want to go ahead and do thumbs on that and then we'll pick a committee, or do you feel like you want to say who your committee is? Do we have consensus on the committee getting together, working on these things, and if they come up with something before we're in the last session, right? Come back with something that you think is actionable this year or next year, and leave it up to the committee to decide what they think the timeline could be. And then just know, committee, I think everyone in this room is going to probably push and challenge and question what you recommend, so sort of really dig deep. And I say that because I think people want it to succeed, not because they're going to push or challenge or question because they don't support it, but because they want it to succeed. So thumbs on that. Okay. All right, and then let's see, who are the brave volunteers? I'm looking this way because it feels like you are a data person that would be helpful to be on there.
I mean, honestly, I think it's going to have to be the HR team.
Thank you.
I feel like it is too.
Jill said she'd like to serve on it. Jill.
I'll do.
I can serve on it as well, I'm happy to.
Rachel, is this something you need to be consulted on? And I think you need to be consulted throughout or be on the committee around that.
I'd like to be available on an as-needed basis, if that is okay. So if we're needing to draft language or look at
I just think that if the committee decides that they think that the bank should be joint, it'd be good to be checking in with Rachel's legal head prior to being final on that recommendation for this room.
We've been, and I'm throwing a curveball, just to warn you. Is it possible to have a Board of Ed member on that committee?
No.
No? Okay.
And is that because you all have just established that the board doesn't participate in the IBB process?
The board members cannot act individually, and it gets very difficult for them to fulfill their role as a 1 of 7 when there's one individually serving.
That makes sense, okay.
Okay. And you're really the board liaison, so the more people could, you can get a pulse on the committee and vice versa. Guys, I will warn one thing. Remember, in traditional bargaining, it's where we come in with a position and a want from our membership, and it's the only way to achieve it, right? And in the day when I bargained across the table on the union side, if the bargaining survey said we want more leave time, I would just fight for more leave time, because that's what my constituents want. I think what I've heard you say when you are really talking deep about the problem is you want folks to have enough leave for their circumstances, generally. Right? So when the committee's working, I mean, think about that, versus just meet a number for the overall good of people will feel good. Right? And I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying that it's tempting, right? It's tempting because in the immediate, people think that's done something. It's quantifying, more days. But there are still going to be people out there that don't have what they need. So it sounds like you were heading down the track of perhaps making sure people have access to what they need generally. So we don't have who's taking notes of who else on this committee? You're on the committee? You're on the committee.
On the board.
You're on the committee. Rachel's going to be reached out as needed. Jill did have her hands up.
Yeah, she's
Jill's
on
on
there.
there.
We brought her up there.
We got her. We also know where to find
Do you guys
her.
feel like you need any
Do you feel like you
additional
need
people?
any other admins to serve?
Yeah, that's a good question. Who?
Yeah, I think we probably do. I don't have enough experience in
Yeah.
terms of
Let us think
the
about that.
subcommittee process to know.
Dr. Hubbard might just, tell someone.
And I might
to serve
defer
it. Let
to
me-
Jill on this. Hi, Jill. Maybe another teacher or two that's not at this table that you can think of, Jill?
Like, you may think of right now?
Not right now. No, sorry. I was not putting you on the spot.
Can we have a name? Thank you.
Yep, but another couple, Jill, if you can think about that.
I do want to
Well,
warn you
you
guys,
guys
we're
have-
getting very large.
Yeah.
Which is totally okay.
You get over 7, you're not
The bigger it is, the more difficult scheduling is, and then just the less efficient. You get more minds, you get more thoughts, but.
True.
Just something to think about.
Yeah. So right now you have 3, potentially 4 from the association, 1 from admin. We're admin short. So
Yeah,
you guys
we're
have
looking
to.
at.
I can.
You can? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
And then you'll think about one other person that's maybe in an administrative role that can really support the team.
I mean, I think we might, Pam is probably a possibility. It's really nerve-wracking when you're like on the
Right.
TV and everything you write.
Okay.
Cool.
All righty. I think we're done with this one for now. It's not a resolved issue, but you've got a next step on it. So I think we also wanted to try to at least frame and focus and perhaps even identify
Yes.
interest for one more issue statement. And I don't recall which one
Late
that was.
resignation data?
Yes, late resignation.
Yeah.
So this is sort of, I will say a two-parter. One's not really anything we need at IBB, but just sort of put this pin in. We've now this year gone to a late resignation provision that is suitable replacement with 4 exceptions built in. And so I asked Dr. Higgins to put together some data on this year, just so we could look at it. We're not wanting to, go back to the studs on our late resignation. We've done a lot of work on it, but we do think it's important to keep looking at data.
Can you read the how do we?
Oh, yes. I don't know that I really wrote it as a how do we.
No,
What I wrote was,
we have
we
revised
revised our
our late
provision a
resi-
couple
yeah.
times with the goal of reducing it. So how do we make sure, I guess how do we make sure that our revised late resignation provision fulfills the interests that we had identified? And one of those interests is we want to look at reducing late resignations, but mostly reducing during the school year, so that we have consistency in the classroom.
How do we ensure the revised late resignation provision is working?
Yes.
And I think there were folks that are on this team this year that weren't part of that. So can someone give a really quick history on what you were trying to address and how you tried to do it, and then you can give us the current status or something? Does that make sense? And are you ready to take that, Rachel?
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. So we put together this like red to green chart about different late resignation provisions across the state of Kansas. And ours was pretty permissive in allowing contract year resignations in that it was a liquidated damages provision. And I think we just got this feeling in general in HR that it's icky to like demand money from people to get out of their contract. It's not something that anyone, our feeling was you have a contract, you're bound to it, you should stick to it. We don't want to be exacting funds out of you to get out of your contract, although it is more permissive, right? Because all you have to do is pay those damages and we don't have a choice. We have to release you. And so,
And what kind of problem was that creating?
Again, when you have a teacher who resigns during the contract year, it's operational problems on the district. It's a burden on HR to try and find a hire. You can imagine, particularly if you're an elementary parent, if I found out in the middle of school year that my kid's teacher was leaving, that would cause me so much trepidation and worry, and there's a lot of transition. So it, impact on students, impact on student learning, and significant burden on the administration to fill that. So we got to a point where we looked at other districts, and a lot of them had suitable replacement structured with different dates in it, and that's sort of what we've gone to in Shawnee Mission. So can you pull up the data? That, and I don't know, just again, if you just want to share what it's been like this year since we went to it. I know we've done a lot of education. We sent out joint updates about it, so people.
Is there a way to share what
understood.
what the process is now?
Yes.
Even if it's not too much to just verbalize.
Yeah. So I'll just pull up the P&A here. We still have liquidated damages over the summer. So there's release that's allowed during the summer. And so from the statutory date, which is somewhere usually beginning of May to June 30th, it's $500. And then in July, it's $1,500. And then in August and before the first contract day, it's $2,000. And then if you haven't resigned before the first contract day, you can resign, but there has to be a suitable replacement found for you first. A challenge that we've talked about, and it's just a reality of suitable replacement, is that some positions are easier to fill than others. And I don't know if you've ever had to do that, or if HR's ever had to do that this year, find a replacement, and if we've been able to do it or not. And then we kept our qualifying exemptions, but we added one to get at the issue of an employee who has a medical issue.
What were your exemptions? It was spouse
Move of a
transfer?
spouse, more than 75 miles away, job promotion, mutual benefit. That's typically where it is mutually agreed that a separation needs to happen. We do a separation agreement to break the contract. And then the one that I raised the issue statement about is about where a professional employee gets approved for 12 continuous weeks of FML and still isn't able to.
Oh, that's
return.
right. It was like a medical situation.
And we sort of have a loophole that was found, and so just wanting to see if we can.
They would be
close
exempt from
that.
the 500, 1,500, and the suitable replacement piece?
Correct. So just speaking in terms of the data, obviously we've done a fairly decent job of tracking this over the years, so you can see historically kind of where we're at with late resignations. So 17, 18, we had 31, 24 the next year, 19, 20, 23, 20, 21, 55. 21, 22, 29, last year 35. This year, as of, I can't remember the exact date when we pulled this, but we were at a total of 37, okay? So a couple things to make note of. 20 of these happened over the summer, so they were subject to the penalty structure. I think all of them, but there could have been some of those exceptions. I'd have to go back and look. 17 of those have occurred since the beginning of the school year. Okay. I don't know So then we break down, so we've done a really good job of starting to track why people are resigning. And so we do have that information. So 8 people noted a health reason. It should be noted that all 8 of those have been during the school year. 11 are leaving the profession, 4 accepted a job in the state, 3 outside of the state, 4 moving, 1 staying at home, and then 6 other. So just a breakdown of the reasons on those totals. This is from June the 3rd until present-ish time, and that June 3rd is the statutory date that people had to submit their resignation by.
Right.
I think the biggest, kind of eye-opener is the 8 health reasons, and all of them being during the school year. And
that was the new exception?
so is that a cause for it? Is there a correlation there? Is it just, do we have enough data to really even make assumptions about anything? It's just interesting to make note of.
Of the 25 that left the previous year, do we know if any of of the 35, sorry, do we know of how many of those were health-related? And when we say health-related, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like, holy crap, I've got a cancer diagnosis and I'm not going to make it health-related? Or are we talking about, wow, I've utilized that FML? Like, what are we talking about with health?
If they marked health on the form, then that's what we did.
Okay, so we don't have any more in-depth information besides just health.
There's mental health that people marked, that, the stress of the job was too much. They marked that was health. All the reasons you marked, FMLA reasons.
This is self-selected on the form?
Correct.
So this isn't necessarily the FML
got it.
exemption. So they could have paid over the summer and said health.
Oh, it's not the FMLA
It's not
exemption.
necessarily all using that.
But nobody did over the summer mark health.
Oh, they did?
Oh, okay.
No.
Oh, interesting.
So this year, 8 people marked health. All of them have been during the school year.
Okay.
Do we know how many of the 11 leaving the profession was over the summer versus during the school year?
I would have to look.
Okay.
I mean, I could break all of those down. The health one was the only one that I broke down because they all were during the school year. And that related to the exemption that was added in the P&A the last cycle.
So they came with an FML certification that said 12 continuous weeks?
Those 8 folks?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
It's interesting that I know the number of special ed teachers is quite a bit smaller than all of elementary and secondary, but yet it's the same number of resignations. Higher rate of late resignations with sped teachers. By far, right?
Do you have a breakdown between elementary and secondary for that?
Of the SPED?
No, for SPED.
Of SPED.
I mean, I could get it, but no, not off the top of my
Because that
head.
would be more interesting to me than the total number. Because I also do nothing about elementary SPED.
So I think it's important that we keep looking at this and keep, getting feedback from the association about how it's viewed by teachers, keep getting feedback from human resources about what it's like living with this day to day.
Yeah, one thing I will.
Make sure it's still working.
One thing I will say is you can look historically, we've always had late resignations.
Right.
And so, it stinks, right? But it's an issue we've, from the data, have always had. So.
And I'll just tell you from the school attorney perspective, it's exhausting. Like, no school attorney wants to do this, wants to deal with this. And it's one of those things where you have to decide. I actually sent an email to my counterparts in Olathe and Blue Valley, and I said, are you guys filing license complaints when you have teachers break your contract? Because it is so much work, and it's like, well, you didn't honor your contract, you got terminated, and now I, as a school attorney, when I have 1,000 things on my plate, have to spend hours drafting up this petition to get the Professional Practices Commission to hold you accountable. And they said they are, because they have to enforce their P&A and they have to do it consistently. But it's like, I don't want to. It's not fun at all.
Teachers don't want to leave mid-year either.
Right.
I really need to stress that. We don't go into this job thinking, heck yeah, I'm going to do this, and then come October be like, wow, I'm out. Like, we don't want to leave early. Something else is occurring. The real issue we need to really focus on is, why do people feel as though they need to leave? Are we supporting them while they're here? Do they feel like they're supported? Do they have support? Do they know where to get the support?
And I'd also like to say that without the liquidated damages, we have more people leaving. So that's what we thought was the reason why people were leaving, was because they were able to pay and leave.
It was just liquidated damages.
Yeah. That's also, yes, very interesting.
Yeah,
That
and we're not even
it's not
through the full year.
preventing people.
Yeah, and we're
Well,
not even through the
we've
year.
had in the 31, 29, I mean, percentage-wise, you're still talking about a very small number.
Right,
So it's
right.
important to remember that when we're talking about differences of, 6 to whatever, it's still
Right.
very small. It's not a huge jump.
You're never going to have
percentage-wise.
zero.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I definitely think we should continue to track it. It's like, well, if they're
Oh,
not-
I definitely feel like we need to track it, because I would be interested in how many are your 0 to 5, because those are your most likely to
Yeah,
leave the
there's a lot
profession.
more data you can
Yeah,
look at.
those are the most likely to leave the profession anyway.
What grade level, what school?
What grade level was it?
I'd
How
even
long
like
had they
to
been in that
look
grade
at
level? Was it
feeder
new?
patterns buildings.
Yeah.
Like, where are these resignations coming from? Is it a feeder pattern? Is it title? Is it non-title?
Yeah.
A lot of those factors I would like to know as well.
Yep.
No, I definitely think it's good information to have, and I feel like we need to break it down even more at this point, so.
So Casey's comment is a good segue into the issue that we've identified for late resignation, which is that, and you heard Dr. Higgins allude to, some concerns about abuse or loophole in this FMLA provision that we added. We had a situation that happened this year, again, keeping it completely anonymous, where a first-year teacher got another job and didn't honor their contract and attempted to file for FML when the principal was receiving job reference requests. And if you are on FML, you remain employed, right? The idea is that you cannot physically work. You cannot work anywhere.
Right.
You are unable to work, and that is why you would be released from your contract, right? So, again, the reason why I said it's a good segue is because that individual did not seek out resources. They did not come to Human Resources and talk about supports, ask for supports, even go to ADA.
Were they a
anything like
first-year teacher? Did they know of the supports? Because to me, that goes back to the education piece. What can we do to make sure that our new people don't abuse this because they understand what it says, as opposed to them just,
So in
hey,
this
there's
case,
this.
in this particular case, again, trying to keep it as anonymous
no,
as
absolutely.
possible, this person, it takes two to come to the table, right?
Yes.
This person did not come to the table. They obtained a new position that they saw as more favorable. So they did not, it was completely out of the blue. There was no opportunity to provide those things. And so my concern is that the idea when we talked about this was you start taking FML for any reason. It could include a mental health crisis related to your job, but for any reason, you get down the road and you say, there's no way I can come back after 12 weeks. And if you turn that in within a certain time period, then you are released. But you remain under contract while you are taking leave and trying to improve your health and see if you can come back. And so then we tried to solve this issue. Well, what about these teachers who haven't worked for us long enough? Their first year was Shawnee Mission, so they haven't hit FML eligibility. And that's where my finite concern is for this school year. Because we can't approve them for FML. And so, again, this particular employee was not dishonest. They were very honest about what was happening, right? They didn't try to pull the rug under. They were very honest that they had a position. Well, that would be FML abuse. We only knew because this person was honest.
Right.
Also because reference request emails were coming into the principal in December, but, wasn't trying to hide it. And so the problem that I see is for those small, we're talking about very first year, how do we account for you have a medical issue that prevents you from working? And there's a really good reason to release you from your contract, but you're not FML eligible yet. They would hit FML eligibility in April.
Right, for that, yeah.
They'd hit it in April, but in
Okay.
that case, they would be able to they'd be able to submit their resignation on time anyway.
It wouldn't
Right.
be-
So, to be pretty direct, I don't like what I wrote and what I came up with. I think that it puts incentives in the wrong places.
So the concern is for the first-year teachers
Yes.
who need to take that long-term but can't?
Yes.
Okay, I was just making sure.
And again,
Actually,
like,
clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only first-year teachers or
any first year in the district.
first year in the
Oh, so-
district?
There we go, sorry,
Correct.
that's what I,
Yep.
yes, that's what I meant.
Not eligible.
Right.
Right, they're not
Right.
eligible for FML, so that it's like, there's
So
not a real
what do we
certification
do?
process because they're not getting FML because we can't give it to them.
Right.
And so there's no, oh, you're still our employee and we're checking in with you and how are things are going and are you coming back or do we need to keep this up, so.
What do other districts do? Because I didn't think about not having.
I think they go, I think there's I think they're using their mutual agreement thing for that.
Okay.
Is you come and talk to me and you tell me what's going on with, me being the appropriate administrator in a confidential setting of why you're medically unable to work. I also think the ADA, that's what we do for those employees who are not FML eligible. So let's say we're really talking about this acute issue of your job causing you extreme mental health problems. You would go to Human Resources and they would say, okay, here's the ADA form, go have your physician fill it out, and your physician would write, they need a week of leave, and they also need this, whatever, support. And we would provide it. And let's say we continue to work with them and continue to work with them, and it wasn't getting any better, and it wasn't getting any better, and it got to a place where as we're working through reasonable accommodations, it would be a process that you would work through that
Right.
potentially could end in a mutual agreement to release the employee,
Right.
but they need to be going ADA so they can get those supports. They're not getting that on the FML side.
Right.
So that's, again, I think about the, laying in bed at night trying to, how to solve this, but I do think, again, the issue is just, the finite issue or problem that I have is that one part about if you're not FML eligible yet, that I'd like to try and solve.
Have you had any ideas about how you might solve that?
So one would be to just not have that part in there, because we're talking about first-year teachers prior to April only. And then steer them toward conversations with Human Resources to see if it makes sense to do a mutual agreement.
But if we take that part out of there, then your second through whatever, your teachers lose that, correct?
No, I don't mean the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
You just mean this.
That's why,
If you're not
if you're
eligible
not
yet.
eligible.
Got it, okay,
If you're
that's
not
why I was asking, I was
eligible
like,
yet.
I
No,
don't
no, no.
understand, okay,
Just that
Okay.
language about if you're not eligible yet.
okay.
Alternatively, I thought about,
That'd be, yeah.
that if they're not eligible, we could add a sentence, like you should be working with Human Resources to go through the
Yeah.
ADA interactive process. So at least that's in there, include in. I haven't to my mind, I've thought about this a lot, I haven't come up with any others yet. But again, I'm just trying to think through, again, when we talked about this, the idea was, I can't be at work, I've seen my doctor, this is what they've given me, I've taken 6 weeks, there's no way I'm coming back. And then and when we got to consistency in the classroom, it's like, we've already been out for 12 weeks. So
Right.
we've already got a long-term sub, and so that was the idea there, and I just don't think that idea works with that small group
yeah.
of pre-April year one teachers.
Would you say more what you were saying about, the way I typed it is, begin the ADA process, say more about that?
So my thought was, we could add something in there that for professional employees who are not yet FMLA eligible, they should work with Human Resources through the ADA interactive process.
I'm a little more comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, because again, I-
Rachel, so I want to read what's in there now, just
Yeah.
to make
Yes,
sure.
thank you.
So on page 8, it says, if the professional employee does not meet the FMLA eligibility requirements because they haven't worked in the district for at least 12 months, or they have not worked at least 1,250 hours during the previous 12 months, then the professional employee is still eligible to late resign under this exemption, but they will be released from their contract as of the date the district notifies the professional employee that their FML certification has been received and is acceptable.
Yep.
But they can't because
But
they can't take
actually-
it.
So what we were doing is applying the same standard.
Right.
Same standard. Is it appropriately filled out? Is it from not a psychic? It's from an actual medical provider? Is it, do we have any questions about it? So then we would just say, check you meet this exception, not check you get FML.
Right.
But it's very confusing, and we don't know where, like, the idea is you're in a place where you cannot work right now, but since they're not FML, they're not staying our employee, and we don't know where they go or what they do.
Rachel, can you say, I'm not as familiar with ADA, what are the qualifications for that?
So, ADA is, you have a disability that impacts a, what is the term? Life function. It's something like that.
Does it have to be permanent?
It does not have to be permanent. And what is a disability is pretty broadly defined under the ADA.
It is, okay.
A life function, I think, is the term. So eating, breathing, walking, sleeping, all of those things. And it kind of similar to FML. It has a form, you fill it out, and you come in and have this interactive conversation with human resources. And leave of a short, finite time period is considered a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. And so, for example, if we had somebody that had used all 10 of their days and they're like, I need 2 more days to be fit and to come back to work, that would be a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. Maybe it's even a week. Like, it's very fact dependent. I want to be careful, but like, we do consider that, right? And so it may be that you're having that ongoing interactive conversation and you get finite leave of a short additional duration, and then you're like, I still can't. Like, I'm not there. I can't do it yet. And it may be that based on the medical paperwork that it would essentially be a medical exemption. Based on the medical paperwork you've provided, I mean, we're not going to make you come to work if you were physically unable to do it, and we have this certification, and we've tried reasonable accommodations, and it may be that this is the only thing. So, and I do
some
think
sort of
that's how-
qualifiers.
Yes.
Something that,
It would still involve medical paperwork. It wouldn't be
Right.
the FML paperwork.
It would be the ADA stuff. Okay. So just maybe
You're
adding.
furrowing your brow over there.
You are, yes. Yes, you are.
well, I think,
I'm just processing.
So
That's
I
okay.
do know from talking to my counterparts that like that is the most common reason why they're doing that mutual agreement, right? Is they're having this medical conversation about what's your medical situation? Can you not work?
I think people have the impression that the ADA applies to permanent disabilities. I think people don't know that there is some time off within that. Those are two things that I think people would think that's not applicable to me.
Yeah, building more education around that would be great.
And I think the more education part is very important because when you're coming into the district, the contract's long. If you're not reading, to be honest, all of those details of or the P&A is, and you're not reading all of the details of something you just signed them by. You should, but you're not. So again, just as long as I want to make sure that's well educated during NTA, during benefits meetings.
Mentors checking
I think it
in.
just needs to be very clearly
Yeah.
educated how that is.
So how about I do some homework and come back with like what I think we could have there to refer them to, you need to go through the ADA process and bring that to our next meeting. And maybe address what's ever making Dr. Higgins furrow his brow in the interim too.
Share, if you have a concern or you're seeing something we're not seeing, let us know what that is.
Yeah, no, I'm.
Okay.
You just look really concerned.
Yeah, you look deep in thought.
That's my process.
Okay, got
it. Sometimes I'm just deep in thought.
That's fair.
That's
Don't
just-
read my face all the time.
That's just one of the reasons why this is can be a very, like, am I throwing something out there that I shouldn't be? But I think that's going to be a better thing. But yeah, ultimately, and again, I think this is education on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jill had actually emailed me some additional facts about this situation and said that this teacher actually wasn't even a first year teacher. They were just first year at that building, which even makes me more concerned because that is actually like, you can't have another job while you're on FML. You remain employed. We continue to cover your benefits.
Right.
And so just, I just think that I thought, again, I'm criticizing my own writing, but I was like, here's a way to capture everyone, and I don't think it was the best way now.
That's okay.
And I mean, my only real concerns right now are equity. Because if you're in that position and you're wanting to resign because of a disability, of a health concern,
Yeah.
the best place for you is not in the classroom at that point.
Yeah.
It's not best for the kids, it's not best for that teacher, it's not best for that school.
Yeah.
The other thing, we are talking about one person.
Yeah.
It is a loophole, I agree.
Yeah.
There is a loophole there. And I am more than happy to see what you write and very open-minded about it, don't worry.
Yeah.
But if I bring
I
up
feel you.
concerns, it's going to be that it is one case after 1 year. Seeing if it continues is another solution, I want to say.
Yep. And certainly I think, I mean, again, I think we leave the, 99% of that FML exception in there.
Right.
And we continue to look and study, because, I mean, there are some practical realities, like a person who's not healthy cannot teach. Like, there are some practical realities there, right? Like, we can't just, oh, sorry, you're handcuffed to your contract, right? Like, we do need something in there, and I like not putting human resources in having to wear a doctor's coat, right?
Yeah.
Like, I like letting a doctor be the
I
doctor
agree.
and not have you, like, evaluating, well, are you sick enough? Like,
No, I don't want them
us to do
doing
that.
either, don't
That's
worry.
why we, I mean, there are districts that are like medical, and that's all it says. Well, what does that mean, and who's supposed to decide that? So,
No, I agree. Paperwork should follow.
yeah.
There
Yeah.
should be that doctor's recommendation. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's the right word, but doctor's
Yeah.
recommendation. I agree with that.
Okay, well, I will do that homework and bring
Okay.
it back. We probably need to look at what we want to do next time
Yeah.
before we go.
And get our hands around how much is still left in terms of.
And what other things need to be happening in the background,
Yeah.
because like we have a calendar thing, and I know that usually that involves doing some background homework with Dr. Dennis. So, we have a chart.
And I think,
John
aren't there
Craig.
4 days left, 4 sessions left? And we know one is going to be economics.
We have one more in March, 2 in April, and I think we.
May.
And you have a May
There's
one.
2
2 in
in
May.
Back in May.
Okay, so then 5 more dates left. How many non-economic issue statements are left?
Let's see.
You guys have to look at your shared drive. Any more non-economic left?
Yes, the big one that I think we need to make priority is the PLC at the elementary.
We can talk about that next
Are we
time.
gonna
Yeah,
be
we're gonna be ready.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
ready.
You'll be ready by next time?
Yep.
I think that needs to be our, that's a joint issue, and I think we need to make that a priority.
Is our next time the 20th? And so then, can we also, on the 20th, look at any language that you bring back?
Yeah.
And
that
finish,
will not
close
take
that
much
one
time.
out.
And in fact, if you guys are comfortable, I can, as soon as I have it drafted, just share it on Drive so that you have time to
Okay.
think about it, read it, give me feedback, make a comment, like, and then we can spend less time in here.
And I don't anticipate the PLC.
I don't think it's gonna
I
take
think it's
very
gonna
long.
be quick.
Okay, do we want to tee up another one?
Well,
'Cause I want to be-
I would
Next
say
time,
let's-
do we have a
Do we wanna
shorter
do the
meeting?
district's 403B?
Yeah,
Or does that
we
go
can do
into
that.
economics?
You guys are doing a 2-hour meeting
It
next
goes in
time. You won't need
economics.
2
That's
hours
right,
for
yeah, but
PLC.
again, I'm telling you, PLC, I think.
It's not gonna take
I
very
think it's
long.
gonna fly.
Okay, and then what was the other one you think you would be ready to tee up?
So, it would really be a quick review because the district has already fully presented on this issue of getting more professional employees to participate in our 403B and 457B retirement plans. So it's just something we, again, wanted to raise and say that we have an interest in. There's already been a full presentation, so it would probably be 10 minutes of, can we review and think about whether we want to do this in compensation? So it's just sharing some materials
And
prior
then really
to-
making decisions in compensation. Okay, then is there another one we could at least frame and focus? You know, do that, so we can do PLC, then we can do the 10-minute deep, report on the 401K or 403B. And then is there another issue statement, non-economic, that we can frame and focus that is going to need to be done?
I mean, I think it's economic, but it's something we've done for years with the sped paperwork days.
5.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Spend the rest of the time on that.
We've had that for a few years now.
Okay. That gives us a full plate for those 2 hours, and then we'll just carry over whatever you don't do to the next one and pick something else up. What about the committee that formed this evening? Someone's going to have to initiate you all getting together, so I'm assuming you all will just figure that out outside of here. Okay. Is there anything else?
I think we also need to look at the supplemental to see if we need to have
Committee on
that
it?
subcommittee
Oh,
meet
yeah.
real quick. I couldn't remember who's on that right now, though.
I know we were on that last year.
And Jill was on it.
And Jill was on
Was
it.
it Kent?
Kent
Yes.
was on it.
Mhm.
So if someone wants to reach out to him and get a meeting on the calendar, I think that would be good.
I can just send an email to him real quick.
So we're all comfortable with a subcommittee on
Supplemental.
the supplemental. There's so many S words in that. Subcommittee on the supplemental salary schedule. And then,
And you all have that subcommittee bring back a recommendation before you get to economics, right? Or at least the day of? Okay. All righty.
all right.
Have you all been doing communication?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Y'all just make stuff happen. Then we don't have anything else for today. I don't think. Anybody have anything else? Okay, good work, everyone.